Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our business growth event, this one on overseas opportunities. My name is Pim van Baarsen. I'm CEO for the Service and Technology Cluster. I'm very pleased to say that this event is being sponsored by James Cooper Creston. We thank them very much for their support with this. James Cooper Creston are accountants and business advisors, very much here to help you maximize your profitability, but also help you maximize opportunities. So very much worth having a conversation with them. We have Mira from James Cooper Creston talking to us a little bit later on in this event about some of the specialist advice that they can offer and their top tips. So very much looking forward to that. For those of you who are sort of new to AirMeet, please familiarize yourself with the operations. At the bottom of your screen, you have the ability to sort of share emojis if you like what you hear, but there's also the functionality to raise your hand. And very much later on during the Q&A sessions, if you wanted to ask a question in person, then please raise your hand and we can invite you onto the stage and you can ask your question live. If you prefer not to do that, then we also, if you look at the right-hand side of the screen, you should see the questions tab over there, where you can obviously type in your questions, and we'll try to address them in the Q&A sessions. Then. So before we get started with proceedings properly, I'd like to invite Mark O'Mahony to the stage. Now, Mark is from Be the Business, and as you may be aware, we are one of the trailblazer partners for Be the Business, and together with them, we run a number of different programs to help companies with their business growth. Mark is going to tell us a little bit about that because all of these programs are completely free of charge and available to you whether you're an STC member or not. So very much worth to consider. And I'm just inviting Mark onto the stage now to see if he can join us. And there he is. Welcome, Mark. Hopefully this will all work as we checked earlier, but if you want to share your screen and take us through the presentation, that'll be great.
It'll be seamless, I'm sure, Pim. And good morning, everybody. And before you get into a terrific agenda, just thanks to Pim and the team for giving me a couple of minutes to speak about some of these programs, which I hope will be of interest to you. And if you'll indulge me for a few minutes, I'll show a few slides just to help illustrate what we're offering. So working with STC, we're providing, as Pim mentioned, a series of programs to support business productivity. Let me see if, not sure if it's visible.
I can't see anything at the moment.
Let me just talk you through it anyway. I'll give a little bit of background and context. Yeah, anyway, we've probably had enough PowerPoint at this stage. So Be the Business was established in 2017. It's led by Sir Charlie Mayfield, former chairman of John Lewis, and our mission basically is to help UK SMEs to improve their productivity. And we do this by focusing in three key areas. One is leadership, the second is management practices, and the third is on tech adoption. And the reason we focus on those three areas is because there's evidence that if you can make improvements in those three categories within a business, there will be a demonstrable uplift in productivity. We're a registered charity. We're supported by government. So BAYS is a funder of ours. And we also work with some of the UK's kind of best known businesses such as BAE Systems, Rolls-Royce, KPMG, et cetera, et cetera. So a range of sort of top companies from the UK work with us to support our mission. And what I hope to speak with you today about is one of the programs we're working with STC to deliver. Again, our kind of modus operandi is to work with like-minded businesses and like-minded organizations that have SME growth at the core of their mission. So our Mentoring for Growth program, which is the one I want to speak to you about today, is our kind of flagship program. At the moment, we've enabled over 1,000 small businesses to participate. Essentially, the methodology is we match an experienced executive from a sort of a well-known successful company with an ambitious small business leader. And They develop a partnership to focus on the growth of the small business. The mentor will provide a sounding board, a sort of impartial advice, a guide to help think strategically about how the company can evolve, how the company can develop. I think, as Pim mentioned, one of the important points is this program is free for the SMEs to participate in. It's also free for the mentors. Our mentors are volunteers. They're giving up their time and talents at no cost. But I think one of the things that's, I guess, of interest is that this program is externally evaluated. So we report on the impact of the program at a company level to BASE. And there is extraordinary evidence that this program really works. So 80% of participants feel they've improved their knowledge and skills. 75% feel more confident in their leadership abilities. 30% have improved turnover. 51% feel productivity is already improved, and 67% believe it will improve in the short term, all down to their participation within this program. At the moment, we're working with STC to recruit STC members and those companies who may not be a member of STC. The program is free of charge. I've given a kind of a quick summary here, but we're recruiting at the moment for our summer cohort, which will launch in the next couple of months. And I'd encourage you to check the STC/growth website. And we have a webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, which will give even more detail on the program, and you'll have the opportunity to chat with mentors and mentees. That's June the 3rd, 11 a.m. So please check the STC website, sign up to that. You'll learn a bit more about the program, how it can benefit your business if you'd like to be a mentor or a mentee, and you can chat with people who've been through the program. And I think that's my message for today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the agenda, which looks terrific. Thanks very much, Pim.
Excellent, thank you, Mark. So yeah, as Mark was saying, I would echo his words. Do please check it out on the STC website. Very, very powerful program. So please, and completely free of charge. So that's the right price, right? So do please consider that. I would say. Right. So we'll now move on to the rest of the agenda, and I'd like to welcome our first speaker, which is David Shepherd, who joins us from the Department of Industry and Trade, and he's going to talk about some of the live opportunities that they have. But I'll hand over to David. Can we hear you? Yes, perfect. That's fantastic. So yeah, if you'd like to share your slides and take it from there, then over to you.
Thank you, Pim. Thank you very much for the introduction. Good morning, everybody, and thanks to Pim and the team for the opportunity to talk to you. Like Mark, I've got a few slides, and I'm hoping that it will work for me because I'll be lost without it. So, can I just ask? Can everybody see that? Can anybody see that?
We can't see anything at the moment.
Okay.
So it's the present to audience button at the bottom, and then obviously selecting the screen that you would like to share.
Right. Okay. Share.
It's almost so much fun when we practice this in advance, and then it works fine. And then
it worked perfectly, didn't it?
Exactly. But we're here now, so we can see your PowerPoint interface. So that's
Can you see it now?
Yeah, this is absolutely great.
Fantastic. All right.
Thank you.
Good morning again, everybody. My name is David Shepherd. I'm the automotive sector and future mobility advisor for the Midlands Engine. It's a fairly sort of grandiose title, but essentially what I do is to help Midlands, help the export effort of Midlands automotive companies. What I want to do over the next few minutes really is to talk to you about some of the projects that we're doing, some of the work that we're doing in overseas markets. Hopefully some of that will resonate with you. There'll be some time at the end for questions, but if not, I'm happy to talk to anybody during the networking sessions. And also my contact details will be on the final slide. So more than happy to talk to anybody about what we're doing. But essentially what we're trying to do is to adopt very much a targeted approach, and it's very, very simple. What we've started by doing is looking at at demand in various markets to understand what the market opportunities are and what the lower hanging fruit is. I won't say low hanging fruit because export is very complex, obviously. But where we see the sort of lower hanging fruit, we've also looked at the supply side. So in other words, what our capabilities are in the Midlands, where we might have competitive advantage, and essentially where we have something we can sell. Because I mean that is obviously the critical thing. You can only sell what people want to buy, and then the next stage on from that is where we are now. Really, is bringing buyers and sellers together. That sort of matching program, and we're doing that through various levels of activity, through trade associations, through webinar programs, through trade missions, to basically put people in touch with each other who can do business. In terms of looking at where we think we have that sort of competitive advantage and what we can sell, we're tending to focus on four main strands. A lot of it is around obviously electrification and sort of future technologies or emerging technologies, focusing on electric vehicle powertrain, automotive components, because we've got such a huge component base and capability across the Midlands. The manufacturing value chain is a label for the third pillar, and that embraces all sorts of things from Industry 4.0 through to automation, through to assembly equipment and so on. Because what we found in a lot of territories is that that there are supply chain companies looking to move up the value chain and grow their capabilities and improve their sort of product development and process development. And last but no means least, the sort of vehicle engineering side of electric vehicles. I mean, my view is that, excuse me, that there's a lot of kind of noise around batteries and motors, but that vehicle architecture doesn't really get the attention that it deserves. And for sure, we've got probably world-class capabilities in the Midlands in terms of lightweighting, in terms of vehicle integration, systems integration, and so on. So those are the sort of areas of demand or supply, I mean, that we're kind of essentially concentrating on promoting. The way we're doing that, and what works for me really well, is that in several territories, the Midlands engine has people designated as overseas champions. And essentially, in very simple terms, the way we work together is that they identify demand, and I try and match that against supply capabilities. One of the territories that we're working in is India, because it's obviously such a potentially massive market. And it's interesting. I think it's a fascinating place personally, but I think what's interesting just now is that, to me, is that the Indian supply base is in a rush to acquire technology to sort of gear up for electrification. There's a massive planning gap between what the legislators would like and what's practically feasible. And it must have been in March, I think, ACMA, the Automotive Component Manufacturers Association in India, staged a 3-day conference where they invited the sort of industry bodies from all sorts of different countries. One day was Japan, one day USA, one day Europe, and Mike Halls from the SMMT presented UK capabilities. But what they were actually saying is, you know, the Indian supply base is open to business, and very much what they're looking for is this access to technology for innovation and for accelerating the process, if you like. And we're talking with a lot of Indian companies on the back of that through ACMA. I think the list is something like 46. And clearly what they offer in return is access to the Indian market and a low-cost manufacturing base. Typically, what companies are looking for is technology collaboration. And the sort of companies that we're talking to are established, excuse me, established tier one companies that are mature companies, quite significant, quite large, supplying a variety of vehicle manufacturers. And the kind of products that they're looking for particularly are smaller, lighter ones for the sort of two-wheeler, three-wheeler, small commercial vehicle market. And I think it's an interesting proposition that somebody might feel worth exploring. I mean, we're working with one at the moment that's very much articulated what they're looking to do. They've like a lot of these companies, their core business is sort of the black metal parts, suspension parts, and so on. But they're looking to diversify into the electric vehicle market, and essentially what they're looking for is a black box motor or e-axle that will give them that proposition, if you like, give them something which is scalable, and that's the key opportunity, I think, for somebody who's that, got that inclination, I suppose, and that ambition, is that it could be a route to achieving sort of volume, or maybe a licensing agreement or technical collaboration or whatever. We're looking at the moment at a forum for promoting the sort of Midlands capabilities through SIAT, which is the Symposium for International Automotive Technology. It happens every 2 years in India, in Pune. This year it's virtual. What we've done in the past is take trade missions to that as part of the UK Pavilion, which the SMMT organises. And we're currently talking to them about having a presence at that this year under the Midlands banner. And if anybody feels that might be something for them that they want to know more about, please drop me a line. Another territory where we're doing something similar, but in other ways different, is Turkey. And our immediate focus on there is on buses and bus electrification. I mean, what we see is that there are quite a few indigenous Turkish bus manufacturers looking to increase their electrification, and it's a similar kind of demand, if you like, this access to technology, innovation, speed to market. And we have an overseas champion in Turkey that we're working quite closely with some of the vehicle manufacturers on other things, Ford Otosan, TOG, Tofaş, so on. But we see the bus manufacturers as an area of opportunity. And what also is particularly attractive about them is that they have engineering authority and purchasing authority. So in other words, the decision makers are there in Turkey, which is a lot of the attraction. And again, if that's something you might want to feel part of, then please let me know. I mean, what we're looking to do is to put together a proposition of Midlands capabilities to take to the Turkish bus manufacturers. Another one that we're looking at, and this to me is really interesting too, is Mexico. And you can see from the slide there, and I don't want to go through all of the sort of market information, but the 6th world's largest vehicle producer. A lot of market opportunity. They import billions of dollars worth of components at the moment, but in a real hurry to grow their domestic capability, especially in the light of the new USMCA agreement, which will increase the demand for local content. And again, what we're seeing there is that, I suppose, a lot like here, really, there are a lot of overseas tier one suppliers, but there's a big sort of cadre of domestic smaller tier one and tier two companies who are, as I said earlier, sort of looking to move up the value chain, grow their own IP, and generally sort of up their game, but don't know how to do it. And what we're doing at the moment, which again I think might even resonate a little bit with Pim, is that we're talking to a cluster, an automotive cluster in Mexico. We presented to them back in April, and we've had a couple of meetings since, and they're very interested in sort of exploring opportunities for collaboration. So in other words, that we might sort of run joint projects between Midlands companies and Mexican companies, maybe sort of enabled by APC or Innovate UK or Horizon or funding streams in Mexico and so on. And I think that's quite interesting, because I think what we're seeing is a lot more interest in working collaboratively rather than sort of direct exports, so which I think works well for us. A lot of interest that we're seeing is around the sort of innovation space, is around the sort of agile type products, quicker market introduction, this sort of thing. So I think this is something to me which is really exciting, and it's a conversation that we're having with clusters in other countries, in Spain, in Germany, and I think it could be a good way forward, and it's certainly something that I think is interesting. That certainly the cluster in Mexico is very keen to work with us as well, which is also interesting. So that appetite is there for maybe sort of thinking a bit differently about how we might work with overseas companies. So those are the sort of three main markets that we're busy in at the moment with projects. And as I said before, if any of those resonate or you want to know more, please let me know. What I wanted to do for the last sort of 5 minutes before we move to any questions is just give you a quick overview of how we can help sort of capitalize on that. And this is our sort of general offer, I suppose, that there's an awful amount of kind of events and webinars and information available to help people with market information and so on. And we've got a fabulous network of people in overseas markets who've been there for a while and know the territories ever so well, and it's a real asset, to be honest, and it's very much there to help people. And if you need a cure for insomnia, there's always the website to have a look at for more information. In sort of practical, tactical terms, one of the things and Stefan Lombard, my colleague, is in the audience, and this is very much something that he's involved with at the moment as well, is that to help sort of capitalize on these market opportunities, we have the Internationalization Fund at the moment. There's still some money left in the pot, which will fund up to £9,000 to help increase your sort of overseas market penetration with all sorts of different options. It's quite a flexible fund, which is great, and there are no strings attached to it like job creation, which there sometimes is with some of these things. It's match funding, and as I said, up to £9,000. So that means then a sort of a total project cost of £18,000. There's a link to the site there for more information, but certainly we're finding that sort of very popular with companies to help sort of internationalize their sales strategy, if you like. And on a similar vein, there are a couple of services here, I think, which are really sort of relevant. The first one is the culture and communication thing. We run a workshop, which personally I think is absolutely brilliant. I think you could spend kind of a lifetime traveling and not get the insight that's delivered in this workshop for on sort of different cultures and what's important and when to speak and when not to speak and all this sort of thing. Absolutely marvelous. It's a free service. it can either be done on a sort of one-to-many basis in a workshop, or on one-to-one. And again, route to that is probably through Stefan or through me. And if we're looking more at the sort of working collaboratively and sort of the joint venture or technology agreement type of thing, we run something called a complex markets service, which is again something really, really valuable. And it's really about helping companies find the arrangement that's best for them. And I think you can kind of see from that what the thing covers. But again, if that's something that you don't want to explore further, Stefan's your man. A couple of things now for the diary. The first thing, sort of following on from what we've been talking about, and one of the things that's always a hot topic really is how to sort of work in what's become a virtual world. In lots of ways, it can be a constraint that we have to work virtually, and clearly, it's something we've got used to. But pretty much everybody I talk to says it's not as good as the face-to-face thing. But I mean, the key thing is really, it is what it is, and the opportunity with it as well is that we can access so much more, so many more events, there's so many more opportunities that we can access to sort of get our message across, without having to travel, without having to stay in hotels and all the rest of it. So in some ways things have opened up as they've closed down, paradoxically. And we're running an event on June the 9th, which is around helping you to sort of maximize the opportunity to get your message across in a virtual world. It's something which is I think incredibly valuable. Clearly I could do with going on it. There's a link here to find out more about it, but if you want more information, again, Stefan's email is at the bottom. Another event upcoming at the end of June, 24th of June, there's a 2-day UK-Canada Trade Summit on zero-emission vehicles. The first day is around policy, but the second day is more about supply chain opportunities, ability to network with Canadian companies in electric and low carbon vehicles. That's an open event. It's free for anybody to join. It's on the afternoon of the 24th. I haven't got the sort of invitation registration link yet. It's being handled through Knowledge Transfer Network. But if anybody is interested in that, please let me know, and I'll make sure that you get that link as soon as I do. That was really what I wanted to touch on this morning. I'm using my time. I'm just happy to take any questions now or later.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. Really, really, really interesting. So if anybody does have any questions, please put them in the questions bar. Or as I said before, you can always raise your hand, and then we can invite you onto the stage. Okay. The contact details that you can see on the screen. Obviously, we'll share the slides with everybody here afterwards as well. But obviously, the contact details are there to get in touch with David and Stefan. David, if I may kick off with a question, please. So the funding that you mentioned, the up to £9,000, is that available kind of like regardless of what market you're interested in, or does it need to be aligned with the markets that you're particularly pursuing?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be aligned with the markets I'm pursuing. It does. There is a bit of a process. I mean, obviously, we have to be realistic. There's no such thing as a free lunch. It does have to be part of an export plan, which Stefan can work with you on as part of the submission to secure the funding. And essentially, it's there to help you deliver your export plan, if you like. But it's not market specific. It's not sector specific.
Yeah, I mean, it should be clear that it's obviously not for a free trip to Barbados or whatever, but at the same time, it could be used to explore sort of new markets as long as.
Yeah, it could be used for market research. It could be used for internationalizing your website. It could be used for travel.
Excellent.
So if you're attending an exhibition or something.
Excellent. So Shaowei has raised his hand, so we'll hand him the microphone and see how this works.
Thank you, David. Shaowei He from the University of Northampton. As you know, probably the university across the country are increasingly providing a range of services to the local business communities. So really, this is a follow-up from Pim's question. So I'm wondering if is the Internationalization Fund can be used by SMEs on services provided by universities as well?
Joe, I have to say, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if Stefan can be patched in, whether he's got any more information on it than I have. But certainly, I'd be happy to take it away if not, and try and get you an answer on that.
Thank you.
Stefan, if you do, you can either put something in the chat or indeed raise your hand and we can invite you onto the stage. But if not, as David said, we can always follow up because it's quite an interesting question. Well, obviously, if there's anybody else who has any questions they want to ask, please raise your hand or use the questions functionality. I mean, obviously, you mentioned some of your resources online and things, and so presumably it is possible to sign up for alerts on different markets that you're interested in and get like a little briefing on the latest opportunities and things. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, keep in touch. I'm happy to update what on a kind of a one-to-one basis on what we're doing, but there's also going to be a sort of a program of excuse me, events on different markets that are structured around sort of supporting the delivery of what we want to do.
Excellent. And you mentioned that you kind of look after the Midlands, but is the support that you provide is that kind of like really area specific? I mean, are there people that won't qualify because they're in a slightly different area? And in that case, if they approach you, would you put them in touch with your equivalent for that area and things like that?
Yeah, no, I'd always there's what's the cliche? No wrong door. I'd quite happy to direct people to colleagues in other regions. No issue with that at all.
So nobody should sit here thinking that it wouldn't be for them because they are somehow not in the area or anything like that. There's support available for everybody, right?
There is, yeah. I mean, there's a network of Stefans across the country who are all sort of business support professionals, really. And if they don't know, they'll know somebody who does.
A network of Stefans. That's quite an interesting site. I like that. That's good.
Quite scary in some ways, but still.
I obviously can't comment, Stefan, as you know. Right, I think if there's no further questions or comments, then David, thank you very much. I think we'll leave it there and move on to the next speakers. But thank you very much. And as we said before, we'll share all the contact details from David and everybody as well. So you'll always have the opportunity to follow up with him in person. And by all means, feel free to do so. So
absolutely. Thank you very much.
And we'll move on to our next speakers, which is another David, David Gregory from CBBC. Not that one, that stands for China British Business Council, as opposed to the one that springs to mind immediately. And I will also invite to the stage the person we've just heard from, Shaowei He, as they are doing a joint presentation around China. So, gentlemen, I shall leave it to you.
Thanks, Pim. Thank you very much for that introduction. It's myself up first, so let me just see if I can successfully share my screen. Okay. Just bear with me, please. Can we see anything yet?
Yes, fine with me, David.
Okay.
Yes, we have your PowerPoint screen. So I think if you start the slideshow, that we should be fine. There we are.
Fine. Okay, so thank you very much, Pim, for the introduction. And as you very kindly pointed out, this is the CBBC, not the Children's Programming CBBC, but the China-Britain Business Council. Maybe some of you know who we are. For those of you who don't, we are the leading business membership organization helping UK companies succeed in China. If you go to our website, you see we have a whole range of activities, events, reports, etc. But a lot of what we do is simply to provide practical support services to UK companies working with China, and I will touch on those very briefly at the end of this session. I have to say it's a pleasure to get the invite today from the Silverstone Technology Cluster, and also a pleasure to be presenting alongside Shaowei from the University of Northampton. Now, the title of the section that we're presenting today is The Ever-Growing China and Opportunities for UK Companies. But we've split this down again, and I will be kicking off the first part with a very brief dip into the 14th five-year plan, which has just been announced to run from 21 to 25, and looking what's in store there, particularly for manufacturing. And then Shaowei's presentation will follow on from that and hopefully be digging down a little bit deeper into some aspects of that, including innovation and city clusters. Excuse me 1 minute. I don't seem to be able to change my slide.
David, do the arrows work if you go?
Yeah, they're not working, Pim, for some reason at the bottom. I don't know what that is.
There we go. That's done.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. So yes, starting off with the big picture. Obviously, last year China was affected dramatically, as was the rest of the world, by the pandemic. But the contraction in the economy, negative in Q1, was relatively short. And since then, the recovery has been very swift, as was predicted and expected by many. And at the end of the year, the GDP was a positive 2.3%, which was in very sharp contrast to most of the economies around the world. As I said, the V-shaped recovery was projected and predicted by a lot of people based on what had happened previously in similar situations. For those of you who can remember, back in the early 2000s was the SARS crisis in South China. Again, that was a swift recovery from that. And then later on, the financial crisis, again, the same pattern emerged. Looking to 2021, China, I think for the first time in recent years, has not actually set a specific GDP target, but the expectation is that they will exceed something in excess of 8%. All of us are very aware that we're in a period of tension, shall we say, in our relationship with China, as is the US and other countries around the world. But despite that, the trade between the UK and China remains strong, and it remains very important to the UK. If we look back to last year, China was the 6th largest export market for British goods, and it was the 2nd largest source of imports as well. And just to give one example and sort of connects with what David's been talking about, if we look at cars, for example, 5% of all cars exported last year went to China. So, looking at the 14th five-year plan, and obviously the 14th five-year plan has taken years to produce and is thousands of documents. We've distilled it down to 8 very simplistic themes. But this does give an idea of the direction that China is looking. So you're looking at the first thing, comprehensive development and security. Basically what that means is to try and reduce China's dependency on outside sources. It's about securing and shoring up the supply chain, particularly in critical areas like energy security and food security. With the next item, the new development pattern, otherwise known as dual circulation, I will just show that on a separate slide, so it's worth digging into it in a little bit more detail. Scientific and technical development really is talking about China's ambition to become a leader in key technologies, as opposed to a country which is probably thought of up to now as a country that copies rather than develops itself in many areas. And they've identified 7 core industries in which they want to maintain or establish some sort of leadership. And you would say it's in many ways similar to what the UK's ambitions would be. So just picking a few examples, they want to achieve leadership in next generation AI, integrated circuits, clinical medicine, and life sciences. This does sort of overlay a more wide-ranging strategy, which some of you may have heard of, called Made in China 2025. That sort of focuses on production rather than research, and I will show something about that a little later again in the presentation. Industrial modernization and self-reliance, key areas of interest here are around robotics, the Internet of Things, and generally smart technology. Domestic demand and increased quality of domestic consumption basically really is the continuation of trying to generate more internal spending and consumption and on, shall we say, items with increased value and increased quality. Advanced digitalization in all spheres of economic and public activities. This is about, shall we say, getting more activities online, not just in business and commerce, but also into the government stroke public sphere, and essentially getting more things onto the cloud. Obviously, alongside that, and there's a lot of discussion in the press, is there's going to be a big issue about how China regulates that. In other words, who has the access to information for what reason. Sustainable and equitable development, basically like many countries, it's about going greener. Xi Jinping recently announced that CO2 emissions will peak in 2030. Obviously, there are big targets to meet in the big, shall we say, potentially polluting industries like steel and aluminium. The reality is that 50% of energy production in China is probably still coming from coal power plants, so there's going to be a big continuing shift there to renewable energy. Renewable energies, including and also nuclear production of energy. And last, people-orientated development and social equality. This is really talking about structural reforms of everything related to education provision, pensions, social services, etc. And the key part of that is reforms of what is called the hukou system, and that's, in simple terms, basically where you are born dictates what services and support you get access to at the moment. So basically, it restricts people's mobility. So particularly for the migrant workforce, they're at a very severe disadvantage if they choose to go and work elsewhere to places where they basically were born. Dual circulation, which I mentioned and said we come back to. In the past, a major source of GDP growth has come about from the building of infrastructure, which was everything from roads, airports to power stations, basically building a country from scratch. And then also, then in parallel, exports became a major contributor to GDP as well. Over the last 15 years, there has been a goal to increase consumer-driven GDP rather than relying on these two streams of infrastructure and export-driven growth. And the goal is ultimately to have what could be described as a self-sustaining economy, which is sort of encapsulated in the model that we can see above. And if you just look at the elements of there, if you look on the left-hand side, you've got this development of urbanization, expansion of public transport, which creates new investment, new demand, new consumption. At the top of the page, we've got these things we've touched on about this increase in and upgrading of industry, which again drives this internal circulation. From the bottom, we've got the upgrading of consumption power on the consumer society, which feeds into that. And I guess the bit that is sort of being refined is this part on the right, where again, it's about China still having a relationship of importing and exporting, but developing its own ability to produce key components and elements itself that it needs, rather than just drawing them from foreign sources, and also moving up the food chain so it can export higher value and more sophisticated goods. Specifically in relation to the 14th five-year plan and advanced manufacturing, this slide is a snapshot. Excuse me 1 second. Advanced manufacturing. This is a slide just giving a snapshot of some of the key points that relate specifically to the 14th five-year plan. Perhaps for me, the most interesting comment is the fact that there is now an ambition to maintain manufacturing in a stable proportion as a share of GDP. And this is relevant because back to the 13th five-year plan, there was a specific target in there to increase the services element of GDP. And now it would seem that there is a recognition that it is very important that, shall we say, they maintain that manufacturing base. Also, again, there is the focus on the ability and capability of dealing with the basics in terms of the ability and capability in producing components, controlling processes, etc., as opposed to just being, shall we say, recognized as a country assembling parts produced by others. And again, security is mentioned in this relation to security of supply chain. Made in China 2025, which I said I would just touch on briefly, is a national strategy which was introduced back in 2015. And the objective of this strategy is to upgrade, balance, and consolidate industry. And if you remember when we looked at the 8 key themes, there was a section there about scientific and technical development, which also identified specific sectors or areas where they wanted to lift their ability and capability. There is no conflict between the 14th five-year plan and this particular strategy. The 2025 strategy really can be seen as a guiding policy, and it runs for decades ahead. It goes right through to 2049. So the 14th five-year plan is, shall we say, another layer or another section that runs in parallel with that. And there are some commonalities between both the sectors in the five-year plan and the sectors we look at here. You would say the main difference is that within the five-year plan, the focus is pulling more towards that core of research and development generation. Here, it's more about production capability. But just to touch on just a few of the areas that are of interest, in the marine sector, there is an ambition to be able to produce LPG vessels, LNG vessels, oil and gas exploration vessels. Within aviation, there is an objective to develop a complete aircraft industry producing its own large aircraft, helicopters, business jets, and so on. In power, there's a general issue of power is generated in the north and west, but the demand sits in the south and east. So here there are objectives to improve capability in transmission and transformation equipment, for example. And finally, high-end manufacturing is just one other example. The initiative outlines basically ambitious objectives to develop control systems and also including, again, robotics, 3D printing, machine tools, etc. So I guess my last point, last slide, before I close this, my part of this session is comes to really where do the opportunities exist for UK companies? And the five-year plan gives some indication of areas, sector where China wants to lift its capability. But in reality, those areas are very wide-ranging. And just within the advanced manufacturing and transport sector, we've shown that the priority sectors include, for example, advanced materials, robotics, electric vehicles, smart vehicles, and the like. But I think it's important to remember that these are just priorities. They are just the highlights. And the reality is that opportunities exist completely across the board in what is the world's second largest economy. So, you know, if I just look at my experience working within the AMT sector for CBBC, over the past few months, I and my team have worked on projects with companies within this sector, but serving the leisure industry, the power industry, the auto industry, the machinery industry, the chemical industry, food processing, and so on. So basically, you know, that's just a sample of what we do. In effect, there are opportunities in many, many areas. And just to finish off, coming back to this point where I started right at the beginning of, you know, what do we do to support companies? Well, we do a lot of things, but just to give a very simple example, we have a service called Navigator, and this is a flexible retainer service where you can engage our own sector specialists, which is from our full-time staff in China, to work for you for short-term periods. It may be 3 days a month for 3 or 4 months, to help you complete particular short-term assignments. And that may be customer liaison from a commercial point of view or technical point of view on the ground. It may be business development work. It could be sourcing work. It could be anything. And this is a service that obviously I think has come to its own over the last year when travel to China has been very restricted. Obviously, very happy to talk to people on an individual basis if they have particular things that they would like to discuss about what they'd like to do in China. My contact details are there, and I'm sure Tim will pass them on. And now, happy to pass over to Shaowei to continue the story.
Thanks, David. So again, my name is Shaowei He, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Northampton. But I'm also leading the university's China and Emerging Economy Center, and we are very keen to help the local businesses to engage with China and other emerging economies. So I have my Dean and Karen Jones in the audience to prove that what I said is correct. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so on a personal level, that I do research about Chinese innovative companies and the impact of their overseas investment, particularly their investment and acquisitions in the UK. So what I'm going to present is really the message that I want to convey is that China has rising as a global innovation leader, and we are seeing the emergence of many mega city clusters within China, both of which offered enormous opportunities for STC members to engage with China, particularly on innovation.
Shaowei, just very quickly, sorry to interrupt. Would you mind clicking the slideshow, start the slideshow functionality? Because at the moment we see the PowerPoint screen. There we go, that should be the one. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Pim. So the first slide that I'm sharing with you is taken from my own research, which was done a few years ago. So this was really to track China's share in terms of the world's largest R&D investors. So back in 2003, among the world's top 685 companies that invest most heavily in R&D, we could only spot 2 Chinese companies. Now, in 2018, among the world's top 2,500, there were 438 Chinese companies. So the share of Chinese companies has risen to 17.5%. Today, I would imagine that perhaps 20% of them would be Chinese. In 5 or 10 years' time, it wouldn't surprise me if we see the share of China rising further to 30% even. So really, China has made a huge investment in R&D, and therefore, increasingly, people find that more and more innovations are now coming from China. This seems to be confirmed by a report from McKinsey a few years ago. So really, you don't have to understand their methodology in detail, but really, the further the red lines stretch towards the outer side of the ring, then the stronger the Chinese innovations are. So basically, this report tells us is China has already been very strong in terms of its innovation in some of the engineering-based sectors, such as wind turbines and railroads equipment, but also some of the efficiency-driven sectors, such as solar panels, generic pharmaceuticals, and also household appliances, internet softwares, and services. So interestingly, the report says China is still weak in some of the science-based sectors. And whether or not this is going to change, let's wait and see. And things perhaps, what's happening in recent years perhaps indicates that indeed things are going to change and change very, very quickly. Now, take, for example, we know that a couple of months ago that China announced its pledge to achieve carbon neutral by 2060. Now, for those of you who understand China perhaps more, we know how serious that China is regarding towards those pledges. So perhaps that I personally, for example, would imagine that China would probably bring this timetable forward even. So it wouldn't surprise me that China will achieve carbon neutral by, for example, 2055. In order to achieve that, China has already set up a very, very ambitious plan. So, for example, the road to carbon neutral includes, for example, 11 trillion US dollar investment plan in new energy infrastructure investment. So in new energy generation, in 5G and IoT, in high-speed railways, in EV charging stations, so on and so forth. Very, very ambitious plans. So the message really is that as China has become a global innovation leader and is increasingly investing money into new technologies, that opens up huge opportunities for innovation collaboration with overseas partners, such as the UK. And indeed, I would argue that the UK and China are perfect innovation partners because the two countries are perfectly compatible in terms of their innovation capabilities. So not only the Chinese central government is forging ahead its innovation agenda, but also its government at local and regional and city levels as well. So what we have seen in the past few decades really is that we have seen the emergence of a few megacity clusters. For example, this one, the so-called Great Bay Area. So it's a cluster of 11 cities. It's already a very, very strong economy, city clusters already. So with a combined 2 trillion US dollar GDP already today. And it will rise even further, obviously. And in parallel with the Great Bay Area, we are seeing, strong city clusters around Beijing and Tianjin, but also around Shanghai, Nanjing, and Hangzhou as well. So beyond these three, we are already seeing some smaller, slightly smaller, but still massive scale city clusters around Chengdu, for example, and Chongqing in the west, Xi'an also in the west, but also Wuhan and Changsha in the center of China. And they also, they are also those cities and provinces, they are also spearing ahead their innovation agenda and their growth agenda as well. So as a result of that, for example, according to Oxford Economics, that we are going to see by 2035, the world's top 10 cities, and 3 of them would be Chinese. Oh, no, sorry, I clicked the wrong button. Let me go back. I hope that I'm back now. And among the 100 biggest cities in 2035, again, 34 would come from China. So the message really is that we are going to see a lot of opportunities from China in terms of innovation and collaboration with China in innovation, but also the opportunities of engaging with Chinese cities and city clusters. So the CEEC, the China and the Emerging Economy Center at the university, we specialize in building links at city and regional level, really. And of course, that our expertise is not only about China, but also about some of the other emerging economies as well. So for example, you can scan through the workshops that we run over the past few months. And also that would include, for example, India and Vietnam as well. So again, if we are keen, the message that I want to send out is that there are huge opportunities in terms of engaging with China in innovation and also engaging with the Chinese city and the city clusters. And please do come to talk to me, but also to my dean in the audience, Karen Jones, as well, if you want to use our services, if you want to exploit our knowledge and expertise. You are more than welcome to claim your free 2 hours with me, for example, by sending me an email. So I'll stop here. I know that we are running late. Thank you very much indeed.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Shaowei. And actually, we're pretty much running to time, so well done. This is really good stuff. We'll now just open it up for questions from the audience, obviously to both David and Shaowei. I mean, obviously, as I said before, please use the question functionality if you want to type your question, which you'll find on the right hand of the screen. Alternatively, you can also raise your hand, which I believe is at the bottom of the screen, and then we can bring you on stage to ask your question live. So if you have any questions, then please do that. And while people are doing that, one of the things that, and I would love to get both your views, because with the slide that you've shown, Shaowei, where you talked about sort of the city bay, I mean, obviously, the numbers that you throw up are insanely big, and the cities there are sort of enormous. And you know, especially if you compare that slide with a little picture of where it sits in China, and you see how small of a bit of China that is, and then the realization that all those cities don't include the capital and the 2 largest cities. The vastness of the market is obviously mind-boggling. So as a company wanting to tackle that, I mean, obviously getting in touch with both of your organizations and getting all the help that they can is the way to go. But presumably you would want to target it around a particular city and start there first, because I mean, there's no way you can attack the whole market, right? So what would be sort of a sensible generic strategy, if you will?
I think that's again. Sorry, David, if you allow me to
you
first.
go first, Shaowei. Yeah.
I think that it makes sense to engage with China at a regional level, as you mentioned. That China is such a massive country, and you know, the economy varies and culture varies from one place to another. So it makes sense to me that to engage with China at the regional city level, and many of them are very, very proactive. I mean, those Chinese cities and regions, they are very, very proactive in terms of engaging with overseas markets. So we are increasingly see many Chinese cities coming over, for example, to the UK to promote their own cities and regions. And with with the support and help from CBBC, but also the University of Northampton, that we probably together we can help businesses to sail through those cities and the regions. But also the other point that I wanted to make is that I welcome, the concept of the Oxford and the Cambridge ARC idea. We know that this is within this super cluster that we do have world-class capabilities, and this would be really, really attractive to even to those mega city clusters, even in China. That they are looking at world-class beating capabilities to work with. And here we are, in the UK, indeed with two world-class universities leading the ARC, capabilities in pharmaceuticals, in ICTs, in many areas that China wants to develop. And is in a country that remains open to the Chinese market and the Chinese businesses, compared, for example, particularly compared with the US, perhaps. And that's perhaps enormous opportunities to the both of the UK businesses, but also to the Chinese businesses.
Excellent. David, your thoughts on
Yeah, I mean, I think you raise a very interesting point, and certainly, the word we use a lot kicking around CBBC is granular, basically getting to the details. And you're right, I think a lot of people do approach China, and I'm not just talking about, smaller companies, I'm talking about big multinationals still make this mistake of thinking, yeah, we will go and conquer China before realizing, actually, it's quite a big place. I think a lot of it depends on what industry or sector you are in and what you're looking to do. And I think if you look, for instance, at establishing a manufacturing base, and I had the experience of doing this myself in China on more than one occasion, it's, putting a study together to do that is relatively simple, because you're looking at, where, for example, do your raw materials go? Where is your most profitable target market likely to be? What are the transport links like? What's your circle of delivery at an economic rate? You can narrow things down pretty quickly to a few options. I think when you're trading into the country, that's slightly different, because it depends what it is. If you're looking to sell, for example, equipment into China, there will be potentially specific areas where those industries which take your equipment may have, shall we say, a greater density. So that would maybe dictate where your starting point is. If it's industries which are heavily nationalized, for instance, like aviation, etc., it may be that your distributors, for example, will be at the center of where the decisions are made, which is probably going to be Beijing, as opposed to Shanghai or Guangzhou. So there's a number of considerations to take into account for that sort of thing. If you were, and again, this is just picking examples, if you're in the consumer goods, the picture might be a little bit different, trading from that point of view, because of course, e-commerce has dramatically changed the platform, the way that platforms work and how people can be reached offline. So in the past, for instance, consumer goods would typically be targeted to the major cities, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shanghai, Shenzhen. Of course, now the ability to engage with distributors who trade both online and offline and market your goods online and offline, they can reach tier 1 cities, tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities. So it really does depend on, your company, what you're trying to achieve, what it is you're actually doing, and I say looking at it case by case by case.
Excellent. And quite clearly doing your research in terms of, just so you indicated, where to start, and clearly you want to go for low-hanging fruits first. So if you can identify those cities where you're most likely to get
and I think the other thing that I would add, particularly for companies who are trading or represented by other companies in China, is particularly at the outset, make sure that your options are open for the future. Because you hear many, many cases where people have entered an exclusive agreement that covers the entire country for a number of years, and basically they are then trapped if that is not successful. And my experience with distributors is because of the nature of the scale of the country, it's regional. A distributor in Shenzhen, for example, who tells you he can supply the whole country, it's unlikely.
Yeah, given the vastness of it. No, very, very good. Thank you both very much for that. I think I'd like to leave it here because I know that our next speaker has a pretty important appointment he needs to make after this presentation. So I want to give him sort of enough space to do that. But thank you very much. And obviously, I'd like to reiterate that we'll share all your contact details with everybody. And so there will be the opportunity for people to follow up. And I would most certainly encourage people to do that, because if China is a market of interest to you, then please engage with both organizations and make sure you get all the information and all the support that's available there. So all the details will be provided. But David and Shaowei, thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank
you. And I'd now like to invite our next speaker to the stage, which is Stephen Bridges. And we're actually, excitedly, I suppose, changing continents and changing countries, where we go from the obviously huge Chinese market to the also obviously huge American market. So Stephen, I hope, has joined us. Stephen, can you switch on your camera?
I thought it was on, but you may have to have me without, because as you know, Pim, I'm using someone else's kit. So
yes, fair enough. It doesn't seem to be on at the moment, so we might have to do it without.
You probably don't want to look at me this time of day anyway, Pim. It's not a place like.
Hopefully there should be a little functionality at the bottom of the screen with a little cog that should allow you to switch it on, or maybe a button with 3 little dots on audio and video settings, maybe. Try that very quickly. We do normally sort of test these things in advance, but as is always the case, it works fine when you test it, and it doesn't quite work.
Exactly.
When it's a live event. So apologies, everybody, but hopefully we'll get there. But at least we can hear Stephen, so you know, that's one thing, I suppose.
Yeah, why don't we crack on, Pim, in the interest of time, and if I can work it out. If not, sorry everyone, you'll just have to, as I said, not look at me, which is probably a godsend for all of you anyway.
Let's try that. Thank you very much.
First of all, who am I? Excuse me, I'm a former British diplomat. Spent most of my life living in Asia. It was very fascinating listening to David and Shaowei about China. I was formerly an ambassador in a couple of places out in Asia. Finished my diplomatic career as a sort of mini ambassador in the United States, in the Midwest USA, where I represented the UK across 14 states in the heartland of the USA. I used to jokingly say that for most Brits, we have difficulty with the US getting to grips with it. It starts around Ellis Island in our consciousness, drops off around the end of Wall Street. There's the independent holiday republic of Florida. There's something called Texas, which we know about for oil and John Wayne. There's California, and everything else is buffaloes and raccoons. And I looked after buffaloes and raccoons. However, that area of buffaloes and raccoons, those 14, 15 states in the heartland of the USA, they're responsible for about 40% of all Fortune 500 companies. And it is the industrial heartland of the United States. And so when I left the government, I decided to stay there. Transatlantic business has always been a passion of mine. So I cut a long story short, I worked for a large consultancy in Chicago for a couple of years, and then came back to the UK, where I was asked by the governor of Indiana, would I help Indiana? Which I said yes. So I worked part-time for the state of Indiana, and the other part of my time is working independently for my own company with partners in the US, working with UK and Irish and other European companies who are looking to establish themselves in the US. Everything from setting up the business, entity formation, all the way through to capital raise and investments. And interesting again, just picking up on what David and Shaowei were talking about in China, I would say it's very similar in the United States, that location. I mean, it is genuinely the key. And not everybody will be suited to New York or San Francisco or LA or Houston or want to pay those prices. So why Indiana? Indiana is home to auto, aerospace. It's no coincidence that Indiana hosts Rolls-Royce, biggest manufacturing center in the US, as with British Aerospace, BP. So it really is horses for courses. And you know, if I was looking at fintech, I'm not sure I would say Indiana's the right place. I think you'd still need to look at New York or Chicago or San Fran, those big centers of finance. But for advanced and specialist engineering, especially with applications in auto, aerospace, defense, agri-tech, medtech, life sciences, biotech, pharma, logistics, and increasingly something that is euphemistically called gaming tech, but what we know as online gambling. These are huge strengths in a place like Indiana. Ohio will be similar, but we'll have different specializations. But so I represent Indiana. Indiana, obviously very important for me with Silverstone and the racing world, with the Indianapolis Speedway. So enough about me. I'm really here to talk about Joe Biden and his first 100 days. It's actually probably nearer about 130 now, 125. But and I think if I could give you an anecdote that came from a friend of mine in Washington, D.C., he basically said the TV cable channels are hating the Biden presidency. There's nothing there. There's no soap opera reality that they had with Donald Trump. It's all head down, real policy, real government stuff, which obviously is great for all of us that are wanting to see the US, I guess, return to something that we would consider more like the international fold. Although you can get me talking on Donald Trump, and I will say that I think a lot of what Donald Trump said and did was rooted in common sense. It was probably more stylistic. But so the Biden presidency, 125 days, it really has been nose to the grindstone. Priority number one was obviously dealing with COVID, but he aligned the economy with COVID as well, making sure that the economy could tick on, whilst also looking at huge subventions to the populations, et cetera, that were impacted. So it's COVID is seen as an economic and a socio-economic, and also probably a socio-political aspect. Economy is running at about 6%. That's the forecast for 2021, and a lot of economists are actually talking about overheating and potentially inflationary issues, which is remarkable, bearing in mind where we were 2 or 3 months ago. Jobs are on the up. They're looking at an 8 million new jobs this year. So Biden, COVID, economy. But perhaps one of the most interesting things, and something I'd like to touch on today, is he's gone for a very radical approach on infrastructure and spending. He's asked for 1.5 trillion from Congress for what is called his infrastructure plan, which encompasses everything from transportation, improving the roads, rail, bridges network. If any of you have ever driven across the US, the road network is pretty good, but you don't have to get too far off the freeways till it gets a little bit clunky. The rail system is rooted in the 1930s, frankly, and hasn't been updated properly ever since. A lot of bridges are beginning to need repair. So he's looking at the physical transportation infrastructure. He's looking at a whole new green energy approach. He's brought the United States back into the Paris Peace Accords on climate change, and he's trying to have a domestic energy policy that buttresses that. Climate change, he's gone head to head again with his predecessor on climate change, saying that this is a major issue, one that the US has to take responsibility for and also leadership on. His others are, as you'd expect, things like racial equity, societal balance. Immigration is another big one. So he's come up with this hugely impressive and assertive plan. The Republicans, just to bore you with numbers, the balance of power it's basically 50-50 in the Senate, which is the upper chamber, as you know. But the Biden government has the balancing vote through the Vice President Kamala Harris, who holds the president of the Senate seat and can be called upon to vote in a tied position. The numbers are a little bit misleading. It's actually 50 Republicans, 48 Democrats, but 2 independents. But for those of you that know your US politics, one of those is Joe Biden. Is Bernie Sanders, who, as you know, is a very strong Democrat, and the other is Angus King, who comes from the same part of the world, but is also very Democrats. So it's kind of 50-50 with Kamala Harris on the swing. And the Democrats have a 10 seat majority in the House of Representatives. So he's got the numbers, but it's a fine line. He only needs one of his party to say, no, I don't like that. So what he's trying to do is look at balancing whatever he asks the Senate to look at, especially on appropriations. And so his 1.6 trillion plan has already been eroded down to about a trillion. It's still an eye-watering amount of money. And if it goes ahead, I would have to say that there would definitely be opportunities for UK companies. However, the sting in that tail, and again, Biden has made it perfectly clear that his economic policy, his spending policy, and potentially his future trade policy will be rooted very much in the same Donald Trump mode as US first. His focus is on US workforce, it's on the unions, it's on buttressing the US business sector. And by doing that, any hint of federal money being spent on a contract will almost certainly dictate that the companies involved will have to be US resident companies. So I think there are massive opportunities for the UK-US relationship, the trade relationship, which is already, I mean, the US is the UK's single biggest trading partner. We're number 7 for the United States. The UK is the biggest foreign investor in the United States. The United States is the biggest foreign investor in the UK. I often used to surprise people by saying, yes, it is the UK. It's not Japan. It's not China. The UK is the single biggest FDI source in the United States. Now, a lot of that you could say is legacy and it's history. It's the BPs of the world. So be it, but it's still there and it's still the number of jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So, the relationship is strong, but what does a Biden government and presidential system, really, the way he's going about things, what does that mean for the UK? So, to put it bluntly, sort of what's in it for us? I think it's going to be not as straightforward as we might like to think. Ironically, I think the tendency and the favoring was probably stronger under President Trump towards the UK than it will be under President Biden. President Biden will want to see the Brexit relationship with the EU settled, especially as it impacts on Ireland. He's made it perfectly clear there's going to be no issues to be resolved bilaterally if the Good Friday Agreement is called into question in any way, which leads squarely into the UK-US free trade agreement. Despite what you may hear in the positive rhetoric in the UK press, I think it's highly unlikely we're going to see any progress on that, real progress on that, for at least a year, maybe 18 months. I'm not going to bore you with the minutiae, but there's something called Trade Promotion Authority. This is what the president is given by the Senate and the House of Representatives, which allows him to fast-track flexible trade deals. Secretary Blinken, the Secretary of State, the Foreign Secretary, who was in the UK recently for the G7 Foreign Ministers meeting, made it perfectly clear that the current US trade rep, Catherine Tai, is looking at the back papers and is refreshing her memory, which is a nice way of saying it's not a priority for the US right now. And I think that's probably right. Biden's TPA authority runs out on the 1st of July. So if we wanted to get the agreement signed quickly, it's going to have to be done within the next 35 days. That's not going to happen. It's possible that he can get the Trade Promotion Authority mandate renewed by Senate. But again, if you look back in history, the Democrats have hardly been the greatest exponents of free trade agreements from a US perspective. So I think it's a rocky road for us. So whatever trading relationship we're going to have is going to be rooted pretty much as it is already, which is okay. It's not too bad. There are a couple of issues. There are subsidies. There's the Boeing Airbus British Aerospace subsidies issue, which induced a reaction of tariffs on malt whiskies and some other stuff. The Americans have already identified several sort of market sectors from the UK exports that would be vulnerable if there was a tit for tat. It's mainly in the consumer space. It's things like furniture, it's some clothing, it's ceramics, it's bathroom stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So is it in the tech and innovation? No. But even so, you know, there are little blips on the bottom right-hand corner of the radar, which mean that we need to take this seriously and be responsive. But that said, I still believe the US is the most significant and potential growth opportunity market for the UK, especially for STC member companies. Innovation, technology, specialist and advanced engineering, material science, et cetera, et cetera. On a personal level, my own company, are the two clients that I'm working with at the moment, plus the pipeline, it's all in that space. It's all in the technology space. That's where the level of interest is. And already, I think, you know, the market exists. Choosing the right location, I go back where I started, choosing the right location is key. But I do think that despite the absence of a free trade agreement, and despite any possibility of one probably for about 18 months, maybe longer, the market potential is huge for the US. Interestingly, Indiana itself, and I know that some of the other states had their best years ever in 2020. This was, I guess, the irony of COVID. It forced companies to look at their operating strategies, to change the way they did things. A lot of American companies decided that they wanted to relocate into cheaper, more business-friendly environments, such as Indiana. Indiana's ranked in the top 5 of ease of doing business and business-friendly environments for companies. And so Indiana had its best ever year for direct investment, including from overseas. There are now well over 100 UK companies operating in Indiana. There's probably about 30, 40 just from Ireland alone. So, you know, this is, it's a strength area for UK-US relations. But again, it's not the only one. It's certainly not the be-all and end-all. Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, all of these states around it are strong. There's the influence of New York, Texas, the East Coast, and of course California, which, if it was a nation, I think is probably the 3rd largest economy in the world. So you know, these are serious market opportunities. Pim, I think it probably makes sense if I open this up so that we can have a conversation rather than me going into any more depth. I can most certainly do that. And I'm really sorry I'm not on camera, but please do reach out to me. Jackie and Pim from STC have my contact details if you need it. It's sbridges@investindiana.com or sbridgesglobal@gmail.com. No such thing as a dumb question, and I'm ready to help in any way I can to help you succeed. We can either do that sort of, you know, background information and advice I can give you, or if you want to engage me, I'd be delighted to relieve you of some of your money. But, you know, whatever works for you guys, I'm more than happy to have that conversation. Pim, over to you. And questions.
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much, Stephen. I mean, obviously, we'll share Stephen's details with everybody, and possibly a LinkedIn link as well or something, so we can actually see Stephen. He's quite a handsome man, really. So you know, it is a shame, but there we are.
Sweet talking devil, you.
But in terms of, I mean, obviously, if anybody does have any questions, again, please either raise your hand or put them in the question section. I mean, Steve, I think you've addressed the issue very well, which is kind of similar to China, where, you know, you really sort of need to pick your spots and try to make things there, because you don't necessarily need to attack the whole country in order to be successful.
And you can't, Pim. You can't. It's a huge place. Yeah.
Exactly that. I mean, I suppose one of the questions that I have is sort of a bit more practical and a bit more related to like the current situation in terms of sort of COVID and immigration policies and all that sort of stuff. I mean, yeah. How easy is it to do things with America, or to visit them, or anything like that?
It's not. It's not. It's a major issue at the moment. There was talk that the UK and the US would get their act together and try and lift some of the travel restrictions that are in place this month. Again, that's not going to happen. I think realistically, we're looking probably at late summer. I should say this is not UK specific. It's all part of the US travel restrictions that were formerly in place under President Trump and frankly have not been lifted under President Biden. I think primarily because his immigration policy is still evolving. And the priority is the southern border with Mexico, which you'll have seen the news images, et cetera, et cetera. So at the moment, it's extraordinarily difficult to get ESTAs and visas. It's possible. Whoever it is that applies would need to have something called a national interest exemption. And what this basically means is there is a really, really good reason from a US perspective why you as a UK business person would need to be visiting the United States at this time. Is it doable? Yes, it is. Are they being issued? Yes, they are. But I hate to tell you this, guys, but it's going to involve an immigration lawyer. You're going to need to get this done in only a way that a lawyer who can dot the right I's and cross the right T's can do. Trying to do it solo, you can try, but frankly, I think your chances of success are going to be slim. So it's a real issue right now, Pim, and it's affecting a lot of companies. All they can do is, Zoom and Teams and AirMeet only go so far, especially with the US. I mean, they really do like that personal interface, but it's just, it's one of those things that we've just got to deal with. There are ways around it. It's not perfect. It's not ideal, but it's doable. But it's an issue.
And presumably a matter of time, because we would hopefully see that situation improve.
But again, I don't get the sense that the UK and Europe are priorities for the Biden presidency. Just a simple little thing, going back to my former profession, as far as I know, and I may be a couple of days out of date, I don't think any of the major US ambassadors to the EU, certainly not to the UK, have been appointed yet. Now, I know that Japan has, I know China has, I know India has. So you can really see where that focus, and if you go back to President Obama's Asia pivot, where Joe Biden was vice president, you can kind of see that he's sort of treading in those footsteps. But there's no ambassador to Germany. There's nothing in the UK. Everything's being done by the team that was there already. Now, in a way, that's not a bad thing. You've got continuity. You've got professional diplomats. But so if you back me into a corner, Pim, I would say late summer.
Right. Well, I wasn't about to do that, but thank you for that answer anyway. Okay. I mean, presumably from that as well, Steve, would you say that because obviously, with President Trump, there were tensions between the US and China, and do we expect that to improve now Biden is in place?
Well, that would be the logical thing, really. I mean, but I'm seeing no sign of it, frankly. It's interesting, the appointment of Catherine Tai as trade rep. She is a very, very experienced trade negotiator, trade representative. She comes from that world. She's, as her name suggests, she's ethnically Chinese, so she knows the world very well. But she also has some pretty strident views about some of the policies within China, particularly about technology sharing and JV restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it'll be in many respects, especially for the first few months, more of the same, but less of the rhetoric and less of the showboating and the reality TV that went with it. But again, I think one of the hopes about the Joe Biden presidency was, and he said it in his inaugural speech, and he's reiterated it subsequently in press conferences and other speeches, that his presidency would see a return of the US to that sort of leadership role on the international agenda. Honestly, they're pretty quiet at the moment. They were nowhere near as vociferous as I thought they were going to be on Israel, Palestine, in either direction, either pro-Israel or supporting the Palestinians. Maybe you could understand that, I guess. I'll give them a little bit of leeway on that one. Not very much still on Yemen, not very much on Belarus, on what happened recently. I'm seeing a sort of relatively passive approach to the big foreign policy agenda issues right now. And that signals to me that the focus of attention is most definitely on the home shores. It's all about what's going on in the US. You know, we'll worry a little bit about the international agenda when we can. And I think China fits into that bracket. The fact that it's been named as a priority and that there are issues that you know need to be dealt with, et cetera, is positive. But I'm seeing no particular softening of the agenda at the moment.
Excellent, thank you. I mean, we still have a few minutes left, and obviously, if there's anybody who would like to say something, and we have a raised hand, perfect. Let's see if we can make that work. I should imagine this will have something to do with China, as we're inviting David back. David, over to you.
Yeah, well, no, it hasn't actually got anything to do. Well, maybe tangentially with China, but Stephen, I mean, the Trump name has been mentioned a couple of times because you can't avoid it, but. And we really, since the turmoil of the election, certainly from the UK news point of view, haven't really seen much or heard much of what's going on. But Trump clearly has a sort of very complex relationship with the Republican Party. What's the views on how that's going to pan out?
So if I stretch that out to its elastic limit, do I think Trump is done with politics and the
maybe that's the question, yeah.
No, I don't. Pretty clear to me that the Republican Party, I mean, even in the absence of Trump, because you know, he's lost his social media feed outlet. As I said, ranting and raving about the election being stolen is no longer newsworthy for the cable news networks. They're not going to run with that. Not even Fox. I mean, they'll do a little bit, but frankly, that was then. This is now. So he's lost his platform. But if you look at the strength, and you're absolutely right, David, if you look at the strength of Trumpism within the Republican Party, you know, the fact that there have recently been senior positions held within that party of people who were not exactly overtly loyal to former President Trump, they've been removed. So it's very clear to me that the mantra of Trump is still there. The specter of Trump is still there. And do I expect him to feature in the midterms? I do. And this is the weird thing about US politics in many respects. I mean, it's a 4-year term, but in essence, Biden's got 2 years until the midterms at the end of 2022. Now, bearing in mind, he only came to power at the end of January. He's then got until the end of November 2022 to make his statement, to leave his mark, because whether you like it or not, midterms will be congressional and Senate seats that are up for grabs. That will be a determinant on his performance. So you can see why he's focusing on a domestic agenda. And he has that specter of Trump that he's got to deal with between now and November 2022. So no, you're absolutely right. Donald Trump has gone nowhere and is going nowhere.
I'm not sure that's a particularly reassuring answer, but thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, well, yeah. I could tell you more about my views on all of that, but it would probably take about 5-10 minutes, and I'm not sure we've got the time, Pim. So
excellent. Yeah, we have one or two minutes, but I mean, it seems rather extraordinary that a president that has effectively been impeached twice might be back in the running for the next election. And it kind of feels like we could have a bit of a yo-yo situation where, you know, Biden undoes all the stuff that Trump has done, and then Trump comes back in and undoes all the stuff that Biden has undone again. So it might be a bit of a yo-yo situation.
Yeah, except in a lot of them, I mean, and now I'm going to be unfaithful to my American pals, partners, and business colleagues. They can get a little bit myopic and parochial about things when it comes. I mean, do the average American society members, do they really care about the Iran nuclear deal? I'm not sure. If you have a look at what President Biden has done fundamentally on the Trump agenda. So where is he with China? As I said, is there any signal that he's softened? No. Okay, big one, climate change and energy. Absolutely, there's a diametric there. So we could see that you know, the US would come straight out of the Paris Accords and we'd go back into this you know, carbon green wrong, that type stuff. But a lot of the things that Biden is working on are part of that Trump agenda as well. Okay, taxation. I mean, Biden's looking to raise corp tax probably up into the late 20s. He's looking at healthcare, which again would be an issue. In fact, interestingly, President Biden's looking at a sort of UK NHS societal health service. I just don't see how that's going to work in the US. I mean, honestly, good luck with that, President Biden. I mean, where the hell are you going to go with that? But so, yeah, there will be those sacred cows of maybe taxation and climate change, but a lot of the other stuff, you know, again, if you look at the international agenda, Middle East, China, I think an interesting one's going to be big oil soon. I think because of what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years, production has kind of dropped off a cliff, especially in the Middle East. And it'll be really interesting to see now picking up on what Shaowei and David were talking about, pick up in China and the need for the big oil to resume its place front and square. I could see American oil companies, you know, is it going to be $50 a barrel? No, I think it's going to be a lot more. When, don't know, but potentially by the end of the year. Much will depend on China, Japan, and others. Japan, I know, is trying to green, but it takes time to do this. So it'll be really interesting to see what Biden would do with big oil then, and how far he would wander from that Trumpism. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting to watch over the next 6 months.
Excellent. And presumably, I mean, regardless of all of that, almost, I mean, clearly the US is still a very attractive market for a lot of our technology companies that they really should explore, if they have ambitions to explore.
Pim, you and I have had this conversation many times. I still see it as the #1 market, and especially for members of STC. I mean, hence the reason I joined, because I think it's that important, and the innovation and creativity. I think our problem. It would be interesting to. I won't be on, unfortunately, because I'm going to get my second jab. But I would like to see much greater support from within the UK for innovation and real entrepreneurism. I still think we're a little bit reticent, and we're too risk focused. The first question the venture capital and private equity companies we deal with in the US is, so what was your first venture and how did it fail? I mean, it's an acceptance in the US that, this stuff is really hard to get it right first time. In the UK, we're still really of the mindset, well, maybe you should have gone and worked for HSBC or something. Maybe you're not cut out for this stuff. I still think we've got to get our mindset around innovation, entrepreneurism, and that new tech space that, it can be a bit clunky. There are bumps in the road. Let's get over it and work with it. But for me, US is still the most important market on earth for innovation, for tech, specialty engineering, material science, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Perfect, excellent. And I know that you're there to help companies succeed in it.
Absolutely.
So, we'll pass the details on, and obviously I would encourage anybody that is interested in the US market to at the very least have a conversation with you. But Stephen, thank you very much for joining. Really much appreciate it. Obviously, shame about the camera, but
yeah, apologies.
Well, I wanted to get your views in, especially because I knew you have your second jab to get into. So thank you very much for joining. Much appreciated. Very welcome. Take care. So what we'll do now is that we're actually going to have a little bit of a break. So we'll put you all back into the social lounge. So please do take a seat at the table and network with your fellow attendees. Obviously, if you need a comfort break or another tea or coffee or something, this would be good time to do that as well. But please do make use of the networking facilities. That's the whole point of us using this platform. So please engage with that. And what we'll do is we'll recommence at 11:30. So we'll give it sort of 17-ish minutes, and we'll recommence at 11:30. So I look forward to seeing you all back here then, and then we'll talk about money and some other interesting things. So worth to stick around for, I would suggest. So thank you very much, and we'll see you back here at 11:30. Thank you.
Don't take long.
Excellent. Right, we're just firing up now. So right, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you can all see the slides now. We've had some most interesting technical stuff going on in the background, despite the fact that we tested it yesterday and it works. Got a lot of technology these days, right? But hopefully you can all see the screen. Joe, can you confirm? Can you see the screen fine?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Excellent. So I'll be running the slides, but I'll now hand over to Joe Archer from UK Expert Finance to talk us through all the different funding options. So Joe, over to you.
Thank you, Pim, and Pim is going to be my lovely assistant. So yes, I'm Joe Archer. I work for UK Export Finance. I'm the Export Finance Manager for Northamptonshire, which is why I'm presenting to you today. Next slide, please, Pim. Please, Pim. That's going to be a tongue twister. So first, if I could just move on to our products, because today I would like to be able to give you all an overview of the great work that UK Export Finance is doing to support the drive for exporting for UK SMEs. So if you could have the next slide, please, Pim. So the first product is the working capital scheme that we've provided for a great number of years for small businesses. And this scheme, we offer a guarantee behind bank facilities. So with international trade, there can be very long lead times. There may be 100 up to 180 days in some cases, where you have paid suppliers and you're waiting for payment from your finished goods that have been exported. So what the bank would do is put a facility in place that would help you manage payment to your suppliers, and then help you and support you until you get paid from your overseas customer. So the government takes on, and I think that's the same for CBILS loans and all of the other loans at the moment, where we take on up to 80% of the risk. It's quite rare that we're asked to take on less. So most of the time we're taking on 80% of the risk. We do tend to get approached where companies are dealing with contracts that are bigger than they would normally deal with, or it just may be that it's a longer lead time than usual. And all of our schemes can be accessed through participating banks, which you will find on our website at gov.uk. Next slide, which is a case study. So try to pick out some relevant case studies for the sector, and IROB is obviously an automation specialist, and they manufacture and test and implement robots for the automotive sector. And they took on a contract that through Jaguar Land Rover to provide these facilities. And we managed to support a working capital scheme because we could show that whilst JLR was based in this country, we were able to support the facility as they were a tier 1 supplier into this export contract. So given that there were multiple suppliers that they needed support with making payments to and then waiting for the money to come in, we helped with supporting an 80% guarantee behind a facilities provided by the bank. Next slide, please. The other historical scheme that we probably would do more of than the export working capital scheme is the bond support scheme. So this is where you may have agreed an advance payment from an overseas buyer that says that they're happy to give you a deposit payment in advance, but they would like the bank to guarantee that you will fulfill your part of the contract. And in some cases, the bank may say yes, but we would like to keep the payment, which is usually about 20 or 30%, into a cash reserve account until you've completed the project, which doesn't help companies with their cash flow. And that's where the government can come in and act as a guarantor behind that bank guarantee, which means that the bank should be able to release the cash to you so that you can work that for much needed working capital. And this is the same for performance bonds and warranty bonds and retention bonds. So if you've got a contract that would typically have, bonding requirements in it, then it's certainly one that we can look to support you on. And with all of these things, we are here to help you and advise you and direct you. Although we obviously, with these schemes, we do have to have the bank buy-in and a willing party to obviously make the loan with our support behind it. So the next slide, please, Pim. So another case study, conscious that this is Hampshire, it's not Northamptonshire, but so this company provides railway maintenance to large overseas contracts, and they have lots of bonding requirements. So the advance payment bond right through to warranty and retention at the end, where if they didn't have the support of UK Export Finance, a lot of the money for the advance payments and bonds would be tied up in the working capital. So we managed to support a variety of the bond facilities that the bank were providing on behalf of the customer, which meant that really they could go ahead and take on other projects as well. And that's the whole beauty of the schemes, is that we can support some of the contracts where they may be slightly bigger and longer, to allow exporters to get on and do their other business. The next slide, please, Pim. So this scheme was launched earlier this year. So the General Exporting Facility. So the two products that we've talked about now are largely for contract-specific finance, where you may just have one contract that you need to have support on. But the General Exporting Facility has been designed, and it's taken a long time to get here, because it hopefully should be able to help a lot more exporters, in that there's a lot more flexibility around the support that the government can provide to the banks and to the exporter in meeting their international trade commitments. And this again is 80%, where we would be a guarantor on that facility. Then obviously we've extended the cover period from 3 to 5 years, and we can support facilities up to 25 million on this scheme as well. So there's a lot of things. I was hoping to be able to show you a video case study, because actually we've just managed to finalise our very first general exporting facility. So it's quite exciting, and there's lots of opportunities. And we're looking at a company that provides to it's a business to consumer company. So we've not been able to help companies before where there's been B2C. So we're able to help companies with a lot more quirkiness around their international trade now. Next slide, please, Pim. Right, okay, so the export insurance policy. So unlike the other products, so unlike the working capital bond support scheme product, we provide credit insurance ourselves. So all of the credit insurance that comes from UKEF is underwritten by the government. And we like single cover. We like to have, if you've got a requirement where you don't want to credit insure your whole book, then it may be that it's a territory that you're not particularly familiar with or haven't traded with before, and you're slightly concerned about not getting paid for either political risk or any event, in a political event, or just the fact that you've not been paid and there's no dispute outstanding. So if it's just a requirement that's not cash flow related, and it's that you're looking to cover risk in a certain market, then you can approach UK Export Finance to put a facility in place for you with cover up to 95% of the contract value. And that very much depends on the territory that you go to. So typically in the Middle East, it's between 80 and 95%, depending on the buyer, obviously, because all of this is about the buyer's creditworthiness and whether we're prepared to credit insure that buyer. But at the moment, we're seeing quite a lot coming, because the private sector tend to prefer to have whole cover, which means obviously that they can cover all their risk, whereas we prefer to see the single contract. So it's much easier to use us if it's just a one-off that you're looking for. We recently, it's on another slide actually, so we can skip that later, but we recently extended, really due to the pandemic, that we recently extended our cover. We were only allowed to support companies in the more difficult territories and outside the EU and OECD rich countries. But at the moment, we can support credit insurance to the whole of the EU and to America, New Zealand, Australia, all of the countries that we've not been able to do before. So at the moment, we can take advantage of this new legislation. Next slide, please, Kim. So Bioguard is a local company. Obviously, it's had an absolutely brilliant time recently with its sanitizing product. They won a contract with the Middle Eastern pharmacy, and they'd always managed to get cash up front. So we've been trading like that for some time, and it was great for them because they didn't need to worry about not getting paid. But then it came a time when the buyer said, well, we've been trading with you for a while. We've got great trading history. Is there anything that you can do for us? Can you offer us terms now? So Bioguard thought, well, we'd like to continue doing business, but really we would like to make sure that we're going to get paid, because we're still not sure that even if we give them open account trading that we will get paid. So we managed to help them, because the private sector weren't able to, put in a credit insurance policy for them, which has allowed them to grow from here. And actually, they've used us again since then. So we certainly have managed to help them sort of support their risk need. Next slide, please, Pim. Oh, that's so now just basically saying that we can cover all countries, all destinations at the moment. Next slide. So the other part of what we do, so what we've talked about so far is about what we do for SMEs, what we do for the exporter, how we help UK exporters. And this is another way to help UK exporters, but it's not actually lending the money to the exporter, it's lending the money to the buyer and acting as a guarantor behind a facility that is a loan to your overseas buyer. Now, typically, we have always been approached to do very, very big deals, so 50 million and above, and that's where we've seen our sweet spot with 10-year terms. But we've recognised recently in the last couple of years that there's been a lot more requirement for us to look at smaller deals, and to look at deals between 500,000 and 5 million there's been quite a lot of them. So we do have a new team now that specialises in small buyer loans, so that's up to the 5 million mark, and we are working with companies outside the banks that seem to want to use this facility a lot more, where we are seeing people that are approaching us for this level of funding. So at the moment I have one that's a Turkish buyer that's looking to buy educational material from a company in the UK, and they want to spend 5 million. They want to invest more in purchasing from the UK. So this small buyer loan guarantee can help them to achieve that with repayment terms of 4 years. So there are lots of ways to help the smaller side of the buyer schemes, as long as it's in a relatively good, steady economy, good territory, and obviously we're performing due diligence on the buyer. So in this case, it would have to be somebody that we can see good financial performance from as well. So there are obviously schemes that we can do to look at the buyer finance side as well. Next slide, please, Pim. Another one that was launched along with General Exporting Facility was the Export Development Guarantee. This has actually probably been an absolute godsend to some of the companies that we've helped through COVID and the pandemic. In that we have supported facilities for Nissan, JLR, Rolls-Royce, and surprisingly the Body Shop, which I didn't realise that they exported quite as much as they do, but it was an interesting one to say the least. And the schemes are designed to support growth, development, and working capital needs. So obviously at the moment it's probably more towards the working capital side, but obviously with a minimum loan requirement of 25 million, we have obviously been helping some of the sort of larger companies. We're in the process of looking at how we might be able to make it more accessible for SMEs, but it's a strange one, because we have a 15 million turnover business that's won a very, very big contract with a US company, which means that they would, their turnover would increase rapidly. But they actually would need a £20 million facility so that they can They can set up a new manufacturing plant in the UK, which is great news. We want to see that. That's great for the economy. That's great for growth, and it's great for employment as well. So the EDG can help with things like that because it can support companies that want to expand. They have, you know, the contracts to do that, to warrant an expansion with recruitment, with manufacturing, with finance, with assets, with everything. So it's another one, but obviously with a sort of repayment period of 5 years, it's probably not going to attract a huge volume of SMEs, but it's there at the moment for the ones that it suits. Next slide, please. So this will be the last couple of slides actually. So the EFM, that slide says Export Finance Manager Network. If I could have the next slide, please, Pim. So the Export Finance Manager Network is here, listed here. So all of these people, we can provide the contact details for them through Jackie. I'm sure we can sort that out. But I am the main person for the Northamptonshire area. And my role as an Export Finance Manager is not just to talk about the products that the government provides to support those contracts, but it's also to signpost you to other options outside the standard typical banking finance. So we obviously, our mission is to make sure that no export fails for lack of finance. And if it's a viable proposition, then we are here to find a solution. So we're here on the ground to be, you know, to use us. We're a free service. We work alongside the DIT, so very much integrated into our counties as well and the businesses in those. So I'm very glad to have shared all that with you today, and I hope it's been useful. And please, if there's any questions, I think it's question time now, is it? Yep. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Sorry, there's so many screens going on.
You had a fantastic assistant. Thank you, Pim.
But thank you very much for that, Joe. Really, really good stuff. I mean, as per before, obviously, we have a little Q&A session now. So if anybody has any questions, please either raise your hand or put them in the question functionality. Joe, one of the things that I kind of want to ask, and I hope it's not dreadfully unfair, but my mom always used to say that only the sun comes up for free. So could you talk a little bit about cost and how this works? Because presumably not every single thing that you do is completely free of charge, or is it?
Oh no, well, absolutely. I mean, we do, as a department, we make a return to Treasury. But most of the income that the department makes is from some of the big deals that you would typically associate UK Export Finance with. So a lot of the infrastructure and project work that we do around the world as well, there's a lot of income derived from that. So most of the return to Treasury is from that. We don't charge exporters to use our facilities. We take a share in what the bank charges you. So the bank will charge you whatever rate of interest they might charge you to access, and then they access our products, but you don't see a charge from us to use it. So we just share in what the bank charges. So when you say it's for free, it really is.
And is there support from your end as well to help negotiate rates and stuff, or is that between the company and the
No, that's between the company and the bank. Yeah.
And so presumably it's then worthwhile to shop around to see who can offer you the best deal and all that sort of stuff. Is that even an option?
Well, I guess if your bank is not willing to support you, then yes, you would. That absolutely, essentially, if it was a contract that you needed to do and you wanted working capital for it, then yes, it is definitely worth speaking to an export finance manager to find out what the other options might be. Yes, if the bank's not there to support the transaction, but it's largely banks that use UK export finance.
And so presumably you have a network of
brokers,
like recommended or suggested people that put in touch with as well. So it's you know, it seems there's an awful lot of support there to sort of help you get there.
And our network of introductions outside the banking environment is increasing at the moment. So we do have a good brokerage coverage where, you know, we can access the finance that people need to do it. and you know, it's not just the finance, it's other things that we can look at doing as well. But we do typically, our goal is to help as many exporters. So our numbers are based around support to exporters and whatever that takes to get them support with their finance.
Excellent. And I mean, obviously you've indicated that, you know, you have quite a good network of people all across the country. So there's plenty of opportunities to get in touch. And I mean, what we'll do with everybody here, because I know that Hugh Francis was meant to be part of this as well, because you seem to overlap sort of most of the area. So we'll provide people with your details as well as Hugh's as well, so they can start the ball rolling. But obviously there's a large network, and clearly you want to prefer people should they fall just outside your area, but in your colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is the and I think you may have touched upon this on the presentation. Forgive me, there was a lot going on. But presumably it's you're not tied into any specific market. So if I as a company have any particular market that I'm interested in and certain deals that I want doing, it's not like some countries don't qualify or anything like that, is that?
No, absolutely not. As long as the bank wants to do them, we'll do them.
Right.
I think we've supported deals to about 200 different territories. So we're not tied by that.
Right, excellent. So the chances are that you're able to help by this.
I mean, obviously there are those that are sanctioned countries, which are very, very difficult to do any business with. So apart from that, really, yeah.
Yeah, and presumably if you have a deal to sell, I don't know, firearms to a particular contentious nation, then it's going to be a little bit.
Yeah, you may struggle.
That seems normal, surely. I would hope anyway. That's excellent. I don't know if there's any other questions. I haven't seen a raised hand or question functionality. But if there's anybody who wants to say something, then please do, because we have two moments. I mean, obviously, as I said, we will be sharing the details, and so there is the opportunities to follow up with you all as well. And obviously, interestingly, I'm not entirely sure why we test these things when they don't seem to work on the day, but maybe not. Let's not go there. But at least we got there in the end, and thank you very much for the presentation. Really appreciate that. I think it's been really good, and there's certainly a lot of stuff there that I wasn't aware of, and that means that maybe some of the members weren't either. So hopefully it's opened up a number of opportunities for people, and hopefully people will get in touch with you because you're there to help. So
absolutely, and if it's not now, it could be any time. You know, it's just worth having it in your backpack to remember if anything does happen. Absolutely.
Yeah, and certainly we, from an SEC point of view, I mean, we're always quite keen to share things. So you know, we look forward to working with you and making sure that our members are aware of the various opportunities. So that should be a good thing. So Jo, thank you very much for that.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, so then I'd like to move on to our next speaker, which is from James Cooper Creston. So I'm just going to try to invite the delightful Mira to the stage. Because as I mentioned right at the start, and presumably Mira will do a brief introduction, but James Cooper Creston are very much sort of accountants and business advisors that are there to help you make the most of your business and the various opportunities. And I believe that Mira has put together some top tips for us when it comes to exporting, because I know that they're part of a large international network as well, and so they can certainly help you with overseas trade. But rather than me trying to tell you that, why don't I just hand over to Mira, who I'm sure can do a much better job. So Mira, over to you.
Thanks, Pim. I'm Mira Raja. I'm one of the partners of James Cooper Creston. I head up the indirect tax services to James Cooper Creston. But before that, I just want to say a bit more, a brief introduction about our firm. James Cooper Creston, we are going to celebrate our 100 years next year. We have 6 offices across Thames Valley and London. We are accountants and business advisors, and we also a member of Creston International, is one of the largest accountancy independent network. So, which is very good for us because we can help our clients across, I think we are currently in 146 countries. So we work, say for example, if somebody comes to us and they want some advice in China or Indonesia or wherever, or US, we work with all of our colleagues in those countries, in 146 countries. So which is quite, we are placed quite very well to advise international tax affairs, to business advice across any business. I'm also head of Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific Inward Business. So I work closely with India, China, Malaysia, Singapore. So, you know, it is interesting. So when I take my indirect tax hat off and I do the other bit, which is quite interesting. What I'm going to talk about today is we've been listening a lot about businesses and, you know, export and import and all of that. So I'm just going to talk briefly about what are the things that you need to look out for when you are doing import and export. So the role of international trade has become more crucial in recent years, as many of you know. Also, the UK government has a strategic ambition to increase exports to non-EU countries following Brexit. It is very important that declaration and submission, which accompany the movement of goods across national borders, are accurate to avoid delays and improve compliance. So I'm going to give you a few pointers as to what are the things you need to look out for, what are the things you need to do before you could, you know, do any export or import. So this will avoid some of the delays. The first one being is get the correct harmonized system code, which is also known as HS code, also known as tariff or commodity codes. Typically is a 10-digit taken from the tariff of the exporter or the importer. The HS code determines the full rate of the customs duty for imports. The incorrect code, therefore, can impact upon the customs duty paid and the import VAT paid. And not many people do understand this, because the duty as a value of the import VAT includes the duty. That's why it's really, really important the HS code of the tariff is correct. So the most trading nations provide a HS confirmation system that provides a definitive decision before the goods arrive, to avoid any risk of any incorrect entries. So check the rate of customs duty, if any, chargeable on import. Which, I mean, if you're exporting, make sure whether there is any import duty on the other end when the goods arrive. And factor this into the cost analysis. So this is quite important, because if you, from the tariff, you would know how much the duty is going to be before you start discussing your order with your customer. Beware particularly about anti-dumping duty or punitive rates of duty, as levied recently, you would have heard, between China and the USA during the recent trade dispute. So try and avoid that. So you need to be aware of all of that. Okay, my second point is make sure that the declared value is accurate. So the value of the goods has to be accurate. It is important to declare the correct value. The value typically also includes the insurance, tooling, or labels provided by the third party or the seller to the buyer. So again, not many people do this, and when the valuation is not correct, that's when you get the customs inspection and all of that. So it's important you get the correct value, so you value your goods correctly. And the next point is check the country of origin. You may have heard there's a lot of talk about country of origin lately, and it is very important the goods is correctly declared at the import. The research where there is a free trade agreement between two countries, and if so, does the specific HS code provide a preferential or nil rate of duty? Again, please do check this, because the preferential or the nil rate duty will, you know, that it'll help you to have a competitive pricing and how you do the cost analysis when you do the export. So please do check on these trade agreements between the countries. Right, the next one is the movement of goods in a direct response to fulfill a customer order rather than to maintain stocks or for samples. Consider whether you can pass the title to the customer before the goods land at their destination. So this is basically will become the customer responsibility. If you do that, it'll become the customer's responsibility to submit the custom declaration. So it'll make it easier when you do the export. So do look into that, because there's a lot of customers in a lot of countries will be quite happy to take on the title before it lands at their territory. So do have that discussion before that. My next point is, it is a simple one. You probably might thinking that why she's saying this, but we have had a lot of people say, oh, we didn't get the payment from the supplier, or it was the customer wasn't right. So just undertake the due diligence on new suppliers and customers. It is a simple point, but sometimes we get excited by an order and if it's a big consignment, but if you're dealing with the new suppliers and customers, it is a simple thing, but please do the due diligence check. And consider whether the custom warehousing or free port is highly talked about now, whether you can use that for import relief. This can be used for inward processing when goods are processed and re-exported, or return goods, could be beneficial. So do think about that. There's lots of free ports have been advertised, and it was highly talked about in the last budget. It is beneficial, so do consider that. My next point is for businesses that move significant volumes and values of trade internationally, consider whether authorized economic operator, also known as AEO, status would be beneficial. What we found is the application is a long process, but the outcome is quicker clearance at ports and simpler documentation and less risk of customs checks. So why wouldn't you do that? So do look into that. My last point is for temporary imports, exports of certain goods for trade or exhibition, for an example. Consider an ATA carnet would be more efficient. It simplifies the custom formalities by allowing a single document to be used clearing goods through customs in the countries that are part of the ATA carnet system. An ATA carnet is valid for a year. Most trading countries recognize the carnet. That's including the EU, UK, China, Russian Federation, Australia, India, and the UAE, amongst others. So do look into that. So basically, to wrap it up, the main points are, before you do the export, sit down and have a discussion about the structure. Can the title get passed, and work out your cost, and get your tariffs correct is very, very important. Get the tariff code correct, and the country of origin, make sure that is declared correctly, and the valuation. When you value the goods, it's really important. Have you taken everything into consideration, and what are the things you need to include in the valuation? It is important. But all of the above, everything I have discussed is important, and please do take professional advice. Like myself, there's a lot of other people who are pretty sad, who likes the VAT and customs duty advice. Please do speak to the professionals and get the right advice, because once it can be rectified if there's any mistakes, but it is easier to get it right in the first place and to avoid those mistakes, because it can only delay your import and export. So please do take the right professional advice. If anybody wants, I don't think we have a Q&A session, but if anybody wants to speak to me during the networking sessions, I'm here, or email me. My details are there, and please do contact.
Yeah, we will be sharing all of Mira's details later on, obviously. And when we ran one of our events looking at sort of Brexit and its implications and opportunities, we did have a case study presentation from somebody who just by doing all the things that you've just mentioned and really carefully considering things and looking at stuff, managed to create quite a lot of cost savings on exporting into the EU, which has obviously become more complicated than it used to be. And so there's real opportunities to be had, and I would encourage everybody to get in touch with the likes of Mira to have a conversation, because I know that James Cooper Preston are quite open to have an initial chat and seeing what you can do, and it may well be worthwhile in investing in that. So Mira, thank you very much for sharing that, and I think there's a lot of really good stuff that people should take into account and definitely take forward with the likes of yourself. So and as I said, we will be sharing your details. So thank you very much for that, and also fantastic timekeeping. Thank you, really good stuff. So thank you very much for that, and we'll now move on to our next speaker or speakers, I should say. So I'll just invite to the stage both Adrian as well as Tom from S3 Group. So let me just invite Tom as well, and then I shall hand it over to those gentlemen. So Adrian, we can't see you at the moment, but there you are, perfect, and we can see Tom as well now. So hopefully we can both hear you as well.
Yep.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Fantastic. This is amazing. Right, over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll make a start if I may. Thanks, Pim. Good morning, everybody, or is it actually good afternoon? Great pleasure to share this platform with the other speakers indeed, and deserves a much bigger audience. Also a great pleasure to share the platform with one of my colleagues, Professor Shaowei He from the University of Northampton, which is actually my day job. And I'm an associate professor there in strategy and international business, and work closely on the things that Shaowei actually talked about, and with good friend David Gregory as well from CBBC, in terms of those regional partnerships, city twinning, provincial links, etc. That's one of the three hats, I guess, I'm going to just share with you today. The second hat is county specific. I am one of the Deputy Lieutenants of Northamptonshire and work closely in the team of the Lord Lieutenant to promote the county, promote, the business, civic, charity, all elements, academic elements within the county, but that's inside the county, in the UK and abroad as well. So a lot of the angle that I work on with Shaowei is to promote Northampton, Northamptonshire, the region, SEMLEP, the ARC, in terms of the macro, perhaps macroeconomic, macro links with between the UK and China in particular. Now, there's been a lot of focus today, though, on perhaps more macro and export. So a slight change of emphasis now with a third hat I'd like to just share with you. Too many hats probably, but anyway, S3 UK. Let me just give you a little bit of the story behind and perhaps the personal journey. So I had the pleasure and the privilege of traveling for many years from 2012 to China, and you have to go there to believe it, to see it to believe it. And I've been going once or twice a year since then, and I've become absolutely fascinated with China, the power, the energy, the dynamism, the spirit, the innovation, so many factors that drove me to want to get more closely involved, work with Shaowei on some of those connections. And as we've been building the links between China and the UK, one of the elements and doing that from a sort of macro perspective, one of the elements was, well, if we generate interest both ways, how can we perhaps bring additional services to bear? And I studied in 1988 to 1990. Now, Tom, it might have been 1888 to 1890. I'm not sure, but I had the great pleasure of studying with Tom our MBA in Barcelona, and kept in touch over the years. And Tom will tell you now a sort of summary, I guess, some of the bits of what he's learned by being nearly 20 years in working with the Asian market in both directions, exports as well as imports or sourcing. And so the shift of gear now, I think, is away from macro and exporting, perhaps to more micro experiences in sourcing. And it gives me a great pleasure to to share the platform with Tom. He is the founder and the Group Chief Executive Officer of S3. Last year, one of the lockdown things that happened, I guess, we thought, well, look, why, S3 could do with a presence in the UK. So basically, I've helped Tom set up S3 UK Limited to bring the services of the group to UK companies, to the audience and some of your networks as well. So with that, that's enough from me. Tom, welcome, and over to you, the real hard concrete substance.
Thank you very much, Adrian, for the introduction. Also would like to thank Pim and the entire Silverstone Technology Cluster for giving me the opportunity to be here with all of you in this interesting event. I will, for a moment, share my screen with you. Okay. I'm not sure. Can you see my presentation now? Somebody could give me a heads up on that. I don't hear anyone. Okay, good. Thank you. Oops. There we go. Right. So indeed, I'm Tom van der Heyden. I'm a Belgian citizen, but I live in Barcelona. I'm not going to say too much about myself. I'm on LinkedIn, as most of you are. And last time I checked, in LinkedIn Spain, there is only one Tom van der Heyden. So if you can find me, you didn't look very hard. So I will share a couple of insights with you related to, indeed, business with China. I'll talk a tiny bit about exports, but I understand already quite a bit has been shared about exports. So indeed, as Adrian mentioned, my focus will be more on the opposite, the sourcing. And a question that my team and myself, we get very often, is China still so interesting? The China cost advantage, is it finished or is it still going on? What's a little bit the idea here, okay? So this is a little bit the overview of what I'd like to share with you. So I'll start with a couple of insights regarding our company, just so you know. Basically, the company was founded by myself 18 years ago. And we basically are offering solutions to companies to connect emerging economies with Western markets. And as Adrian just highlighted a moment ago, last year, regardless of pandemics or lockdowns, we established S3 UK. And you have there the email address, and also the telephone number shows up now. But I understand this presentation will be shared with all of you afterwards in a PDF format, so you can review that information without any problem. What do we do exactly? Well, we focus mainly on sourcing. Actually, one of the S's of S3 stands for sourcing, as you can see. But we also help a bit in export activities, and we offer consultancy and training for those companies wishing to get a little bit deeper in all these topics. So far about S3 Group. As mentioned before, I understand a lot indeed has been already talked about exports, which makes sense. So quickly, a couple of slides about what could be interesting industries if you'd like to export to China. I'm going to focus on 6 industries. Some of them might be interesting for these young ladies. They apparently have some cash to spend on shopping. At least they had it before they went shopping. As a father of teenage daughters, I know how that goes. The cash flies away quickly. But anyway, an interesting industry, maybe not for those young ladies, but for maybe their parents, who knows, are the raw materials for the factory of the world, as we still can call it, China. That is, of course, not so probably very interesting for most businesses in the UK or Europe, but is, of course, a very relevant factor. Technology is interesting as well, although we do have to highlight issues sometimes with regard to intellectual property rights. That is still a topic to be taken into consideration, and also the fact that in a couple of segments, it is no longer China importing or interested in buying technology, but in a couple of segments, they are becoming now the leaders, whereby they are actually the ones exporting. No? So that could be drones or facial recognition, but this goes a bit further than that. But still, the vast majority is actually technology that could be sent, could be exported to China. No, agro-industry is another interesting topic that is not food, but how to produce food. So how to optimize agriculture, which is a very important topic in China, because the country holds approximately a fifth of the world population, but only has about a tenth of the useful farmable land, because there's so much desert and mountains in China. So proportionally, they have an issue there, and they instead of importing all the food, they'd like to increase the yields of the local agriculture. No, anything related with the environment, I think we're all familiar with images on the news about huge issues with pollution. That is sort of peaked because the Chinese government definitely declared war on pollution, but still it's not yet, let's say the environment is not yet at a level as we are used to it in the West. So pollution issues are still important opportunities to sell technology, to sell other types of solutions to China. Then maybe more for those ladies we saw before, luxury items, tourism is an important factor as well, education programs, I don't need to explain that, I think, in this context. Vast opportunities here as well. And finally, what a lot of companies actually offer are food and beverage products with guarantees. And I highlight that because local production very often in China does not follow international standards. And so there's definitely an enormous market in any type of food and beverage that is made according to Western standards. No? So that is definitely also an interesting topic to comment on here. Good. So far, exports, as I said, I'd like to focus more on sourcing. And what can be sourced in China? Well, usually I think the general answer would be pretty much almost everything, but even a couple of raw materials. I want to mention that for a moment. Obviously, the main flow of raw materials is towards China, but China also controls a couple of things which we call rare earths, which is a group of about 17 minerals in which China is very strong. Most of the mines are in China, and they're used for a number of let's say sometimes niche applications, but very important strategically for other countries in the world. So this is actually a little bit of a hot topic from a strategic perspective, in which China definitely holds the cards. No, so I want to quickly mention that. Probably consumer electronics is something that we're more familiar with. All of these topics, all of these items that we see here, we can imagine they have somehow a label somewhere saying made or assembled in China. The interesting part is they're all made by one company, Foxconn, who's the world's largest contract manufacturer, making the Apple stuff and a couple of other things, as you see here. Then some of you are probably familiar with a number of these brands in terms of household goods, appliances, where quite some Chinese companies, not only branded products are being offered, but also they very often work as contract manufacturers, whereby they produce for foreign entities all of these items that are, let's say, very common for all of us in the kitchen or in household. No, and I think it's fair to say, chances are that a certain number of the people watching this presentation have a Chinese telephone, Chinese mobile phone. So those are becoming also major players in the field, giving a hard time to both Apple and Samsung primarily. So all of these names, some of them, I guess most of us were not familiar with them just only a few years ago, and now they are definitely becoming also household names. No? And then of course there's a huge list of miscellaneous, all different items, including, I guess on slide 12, you recognized already that I like my slides nice and full. There's a big gap here, and that gap is actually corresponding to an item that is suffering a major shortage now internationally. And I'm not referring to semiconductors or the like, but actually the big box in which we bring all these goods to our markets, the containers. There's a lack of containers, as those of you who are familiar with international shipping are fully aware of. And most containers are actually also assembled in China. Now, how does that work? We basically have developed a bit of a methodology Explaining this in a lot of detail would definitely take me way beyond the assigned time. But so quickly going a little bit in how this works, companies need to first of all define what they'd like to do, which products are interesting to source in a country like China, or which products would you better go to another place, or should you actually stick to doing yourself because it's core business, no? An RFQ is the request for quotation, as some of you are probably familiar with, the document in which we'd like to put all the information that's going to be critical for our project, the sort of checklist that we'd like to pass to potential suppliers to review and then actually be able to quote exactly the product that we're looking for. No, supplier selection, we tend to see sort of 5 different channels. In the first place, the one that we cannot do right now, which is going there, visit trade shows and things like that. For the time being, the doors to China are still fairly locked for us as a foreign visitor. You can work with trading companies. There's plenty of them. They can offer a lot of products, probably pretty much everything. But you will never see a factory, of course. That's the problem with trading companies. You can also go online, of course. I think most of us are familiar with websites like Alibaba, Made in China, these sort of things. You can work with institutions. I definitely think that's an interesting channel to get a lot of information, insights. And I think we heard a few people who are very well experts in the field today. And you can talk, of course, also to sourcing consultants if that is the way you'd like to go, in terms of handing over sort of the whole project to someone who can manage it from end to end, and also include, for instance, other services like quality control and whatever is necessary. No? So once we found someone that is good for us, the initial production highlights things like prototypes, paying in advance, probably to get samples made for you. And then try to see if they correspond to what we're looking for. No, once we get to the mass production, probably the main item comes up, which is quality control, quality management, which has to be done on the spot in origin to make sure that whatever is shipped to us, and shipping is so expensive now, whatever is shipped to us is actually what we ordered. No, so these things definitely need to be managed with boots on the ground locally to be sure that everything is all right. And then finally, we need to ship things, which is right now, as I just mentioned, a bit of a bottleneck. And we need to plan ahead for future orders, future new products, other ranges, whatever we are interested in sourcing in a country like China. So that would be logistics and planning. Right. But there are alternatives as well, I guess. A number of people are wondering if India or Southeast Asia are a valid alternative. Well, the answer is a little bit yes and no. It depends. For a number of products, definitely, I could say that yes, there are specific countries that offer good opportunities. But the answer is a little bit more unclear. Because in the first place, China does offer, of course, and I'm quite sure you've seen that in an earlier presentation in a lot of detail, China offers a domestic market like no other. And that has an impact also in its industrial capacity. So there's a huge variety of products in which I'm afraid to say that you either source them in China, or in China. There's not much alternative because there is already such an industrial capacity and such an amazing domestic market, so that offers a lot of opportunities for those wishing to buy in China. No? India sooner or later will become an equivalent domestic market, but for the time being, it is not yet. The purchasing power of China is not yet what it is in China. The number of people is almost on a par, but as I said, the purchasing capacity is not the same thing. No? So domestic market, that definitely is a point in favor of China. Also, China has beefed up a lot in the last couple of years its productivity, actually at a faster rate than the surrounding countries, meaning that there's an enormous opportunity here also actually getting back to exports. If you are selling machinery, if you're selling robots, anything that improve the productivity of the industry, that there's a huge market for that. And if you look at sort of comparing what levels of introduction of robots there are in China, it's still an enormous market because it's definitely not yet at the level of other countries like Europe, the US, UK, Japan. I mean, those places are way ahead in terms of robotizing. So this is an opportunity again. No? And then finally, a very important thing, we're all familiar with that. We're in actually the context of a cluster. China also has a lot of clusters, and they can be at times huge. They can be absolutely massive. You can have tens or hundreds of companies specialized in certain parts or finished goods that are concentrated in a certain area. Now, obviously, you can move production to a place where labor cost is cheaper, like Vietnam or Cambodia or places like that. But that cluster you will not be able to move with you, of course. No, there is probably in China there's going to be suppliers of subcomponents or whatever. There's going to be maybe customers for the final goods. There's going to be maybe universities in the neighborhood where every year so many graduates come out to work in that industry. Well, obviously you can move a production site to sort of the middle of nowhere in Vietnam or in Cambodia or other places in Southeast Asia. But if you do not have that ecosystem around you, well, most likely you will not find a true alternative. No? So probably that's not exactly what we're looking for in most industries. No? So sourcing in China still going strong. Well, if we look at some statistics, well, probably for a while, yes. China is still the world's largest manufacturer, and there's no immediate sign that this will actually go down in the near future. No? Good. I'm not sure if I overstepped my allotted time, but this is what I had prepared to you, and I wish to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tom. That was actually spot on time, pretty much. I'll invite Adrian back onto the stage now as well for the Q&A session. And as before, please do use the question functionality to ask questions, or indeed raise your hand and we can get you on stage. I'd like to kick off, if I may, because I think with the pandemic and all of that situation, I think there's been a bit of a movement, I suppose, to kind of like reshore and bring things back to the UK in our case. I mean, is that something that you've seen in your experience? It's and is overseas sourcing like still an attractive option, or has that kind of had a negative impact on that? What's your view on that?
I think it's definitely a correct point what you mentioned here, Pim. There's been a lot of talk about that. But I think it's actually that. There's a lot of talk. How many companies really do that? That's not too clear to me. I sometimes talk about these things with business leaders in industries, and you will see actually that indeed a combination of right now high freight costs, even in some countries. There is a sort of an awkward feeling with relation to China. I mean, we shouldn't deny that. And it's probably stronger in some countries than others. I have to say in Spain, it's not that strong. And maybe in other countries, it's a bit stronger. But all of these things at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, the competitiveness of China is there. It's what it is. Okay. And it's there to probably stay for a while. So if you look at it in practice, there is a percentage for sure. It's undeniable. There is a small percentage of businesses who have decided to reshore or nearshore at least. No, maybe go to places, I don't know, Central or Eastern Europe or something like that. We looked into that as well, to be honest. We also feel the need for our customers to cover maybe opportunities for them to look into Central and Eastern Europe. But I have to say, over the last couple of months, my own experiences with that have been very strange. Talking to similar outfits, maybe like S3 in Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary. When we bring up a certain project and we say, you know what, we have this particular item that maybe in China is not so competitive right now. How about that? And most of the answers that I get from these people is, oh, well, we actually source them in China ourselves. Sometimes for reasons that are purely cost, and sometimes, and that actually baffles me, to be honest, sometimes people would say, well, we can't find the same quality product here. And then you go like, excuse me, I mean, that's what you actually should be offering, no? Maybe something that has a quality edge, no? I heard that the last couple of months several times talking to people in those parts of Europe, and it's quite striking, no? So I do think indeed, yes, how much, I don't know, 5, 10, 15% maybe of activity of companies have said, you know what, yes, we're going to be moving a couple of things. How much of that is public relations more than business? I'm not entirely sure, and they will obviously not tell me. But the vast majority eventually look at the numbers. You know, it's what counts in businesses now, and there's nothing to do about that. It's a competitive world out there, so people will stick. Probably a lot of them will stick to China or a nearby alternative. Yes.
Excellent. I mean, you touched upon the container shortage and all that sort of stuff, and you know, I'm sure the pandemic has caused all sorts of havoc on that. So, you know, I should imagine that shipping costs, you know, have increased quite a bit, and all of that sort of stuff. Do we see those increases as being permanent, and that escalation of costs, or do we expect it to come down once the global situation improves? And I don't know whether Adrian or you, Tom, is best to capture that, but obviously feel free to jump in.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball, but from what we hear, I mean, we're on a day-to-day basis confronted with that situation, and from what we hear, when this whole situation with the freight rates going up and all this, there was talk of this is going to sort of blow over in a couple of weeks and then it'll be back to normal. That clearly hasn't happened. Right now, I think our best guess would be that until the end of the year, things will not change dramatically, okay? Which is for a lot of companies really bad news. And we noticed this. We have a number of customers who are sort of delaying shipments. We have had a couple of projects that have simply also been postponed. Sort of, well, we'll start with it in 2022. Although very often the decision is linked to the pandemic as well. I mean, the market development, how good a moment is it for the time being to start certain things? It depends on segments, very specific industry segments. No, you can't generalize that. Whether it's permanent, no. I think sooner or later, at the end of the day, just like, and the comparisons probably is not so good, but just as at a certain moment due to the pandemic, tens or probably hundreds or maybe even more factories in China started making massive amounts of face masks and all the other PPE supplies, and now prices have dropped dramatically. The same is happening also with containers. Okay, I mean, there is an opportunity. Prices for containers have doubled for the box. I mean, not for the freight costs, but for the box, they've doubled as well. So unavoidably, there's going to be a bunch of opportunistic business people are going to say, let's make them as well. No, and there's going to be a moment when this all sort of again levels out, and then probably containers are actually going to be super cheap. No, when that is, as I said, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think we're probably still going to have a number of months with difficulties. That's a fact. That's a fact. We have to accept that. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. You touched upon it sort of very, very briefly, because I had a conversation with one of our members the other day, and the issue of the availability of microprocessors sort of came up, because as far as I'm aware, literally everybody in the world is struggling to get hold of them. And I was at another event where we were talking to some major automotive car makers who just seem to be, well, not quite at the back of the queue, but not at the front of the queue for microprocessors either, and it's quite a problem for them. I mean, presumably you as an organization with the networks and source capabilities that you have, I mean, are you a potential outlet for some of our members to get into? Not necessarily for microprocessors, but for things that are difficult to get hold of? Would you be a potential outlet to help them with that?
We would have to see it on a case-per-case basis, I think. Definitely semiconductors, no. No. We would be sitting on a pile of gold if we would be able to do that. But it depends on the product. Yeah, I mean, we've been actually in the last couple of weeks, we've been asked to source a number of things that were a bit hard to get hold of. And we managed in a few cases, yeah. But I mean, the vast majority of situations, if everybody's struggling, we also do not have sort of a magic wand to solve that. But it's got to be looked upon case per case. Yeah, yeah.
But if people are struggling, it's worth putting a call in, I suppose, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, totally. I mean, sometimes it's because it's maybe it's available outside China. Maybe there are, in the last couple of weeks, a lot of extra capacity being built up. It's a little bit of a chaotic situation at the moment in a number of industries. Businesses hate chaos, but it's best to call the things by their name, no? So and of course, chaos implies opportunities, and there's definitely, if it depends on the case per case.
Yeah.
If some people want to reach out with some specific topic, sure, we're happy to look into it. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, if I may just add then, Pim, please do contact us, obviously, if you'd like to try and track or source anything down. It seems to me that some of the key points are that, I mean, Tom went through the wheel there of what a sourcing agent does. You know, S3 does have people in Hong Kong and in China, so boots on the ground, end to end. And really, let alone the language and the time zone, I think it is taking the risk out of foreign sourcing that a good sourcing agent can do. The quality control, the supply selection and negotiation, of course, in their language, in Mandarin. The quality control, the logistics, taking the risk out. And really, China, you know, my curiosity in China, and Shaowei, I think, is no longer with us. Maybe David's there, but China's a long game. You know, it's not going to go away. It's only going to get more powerful, potentially more assertive, though, you know, the geopolitical tensions are to be managed, I think, but we can't ignore and we shouldn't disengage. It is a question of engaging with China. And I think Tom's last chart there is very telling in terms of it is still the manufacturing, you know, the manufacturer of the world. So I find it fascinating, learning every day about it. And I hope that this S3 UK, S3 Group S3 can be, you know, of service to some of our companies in the Silverstone Technology Cluster in the region and beyond, because I think Tom has, you know, definitely got 20 years hard experience of what it's like, and so his knowledge, his wisdom, his contact networks are something of value that I thought was very worthwhile to bring to the UK.
Yeah, no, I would certainly say that you know, if people are considering these markets and are looking into them either to source or to export to or whatever, you know, at least have a conversation. I think we've introduced a lot of people here today that have a lot of knowledge, and I would always encourage our members to try to tap into that and have conversations on that. So so thank you very much. And I actually think that that's a great point to leave it on. So Tom, thank you very much. Adrian, thank you very much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Because we've just about arrived at the time. I'm actually quite impressed with how well we've managed to keep it to time. Amazingly. So thank you all very much. You've all been very good in keeping it to time. That's great. So thank you very much appreciated. Tom, Adrian, thank you. So that just leaves me to wrap up the event. Really, now we will leave the event and the social lounge open for you to network. So if you do want to have follow-up conversations, you have the ability to do that. We'll keep it open until about 1 o'clock. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of our speakers. You know, I think we've had some really interesting presentations today. I've certainly been made aware of issues that I wasn't aware of before, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there for a number of our members to get engaged in. So and wider cluster companies, of course, when I say members. So do please, you know, get in touch with them and follow up with them, and we'll provide you all the details to do that. This recording of this event will be available on our YouTube channel as well. So if you want to look back on anything, then you'll have the opportunity to do so. I'd also like to express our thanks to our supporter, James Cooper Creston, and obviously special thanks to Mira for jumping in with some very valuable advice there. But I would encourage people that, you know, if you're looking at exporting, or indeed if you're looking to just increase the profitability of your business, or making sure you're getting things right, then do please have an exploratory conversation with James Cooper Preston. I'm sure they'll be delighted to help you, and I think there's a lot of value that they can add. So I would encourage you all to get in touch with them. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Something to do with Alcohol's rhythms. So please do that. Thank you very much for participating. And as I said, please enjoy the networking afterwards. And we'll hope to see you again at our next event. So thank you very much and goodbye.